All right, let's go ahead and call the Senate to order. The Sergeant at Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right, Senators, we are very pleased today to have with us again Bishop Craig Coates of Fresh Start Church and Family Life Center from Glen Burnie, Maryland, guest of the Distinguished Senator from the 32nd District. Please rise for the invocation.
Let us pray. Eternal Creator and Sustainer, each day you have granted the Senate the strength and tenacity to oversee the affairs of this great state. As legislative stewards, they do not take lightly the privilege of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Grant them the wisdom to lead in truth, integrity, justice, and fairness. And may they be empowered to continue to make the state of Maryland a more beautiful, inclusive, and safer place. May their decisions continue to represent the concerns of every resident, and may they always stand united, even through turbulent times. Amen.
Thank you, sir. That was wonderful. I appreciate that. Thank you. Chair recognizes the Senator from the 32nd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm really proud today to have Bishop Craig Coates here. His church, Fresh Start, is in my district, although he lives in District 30, so we share him. But he has a deep passion for sharing the truths of scriptures with over 25 years of pastoral experience. He has a unique ability to unpack complex issues and concepts in a way that's engaging and relatable. Dr. Coates is not only a gifted preacher, but also an accomplished musician and clinician with over 33 years of experience in worship. His passion for church growth and development is evident in everything he does. He's so proud of his church and the work they do in the community, the work they do with behavioral health. He and his community church are a valuable asset, and he's very proud to be the leader on Juneteenth that's coming up this year. So
Wonderful.
Thank you for having Pastor Coates here, and please can we journalize his prayer. Thank
Without objection, Senator, of course we will journalize the pastor's wonderful remarks. They were a good start to the morning, brief and brilliant, just as our chair of executive NOM says. It was excellent, excellent. All right, has everyone recorded their presence? Almost. All right. All right. Do we have Senator from District? I thought Senator from District 7 was here. All right. The clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber, a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. We have several resolutions today. We will begin, not to be outdone, there's all these multiple championships, and so we're back to the senator from the 33rd District who has another multiple championship day.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm very proud to have so many accomplished lacrosse teams in my district. Today we are joined by actually my home team of Severna Park High School. The 2023 Severna Park girls lacrosse team earned the program's state record 15th state championship, and the first since 2019. This team led by first-year head coach Annie Houghton and assisted by Gretchen Meyer, Kelly Kazmarek, Paige Thummel, Teresa Zichelli, and Jen Edwards strive for perfection on the field and in the classroom. The overall team GPA was an outstanding 4.24, the highest team GPA in the county. On the field, they were crowned Anne Arundel County champions on their way to winning states. They are also joined today by Severna Park High School principal Lindsay Abruzzo, and I would ask that the resolution be read in full.
The clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to Severna Park High School Girls Lacrosse in recognition of winning the Class 3A 2023 Girls Lacrosse State Championship. We applaud your outstanding season and wish you many more. Congratulations. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be present on this 13th day of March 2024.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. To the ladies of Severna Park High School girls lacrosse team, the Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates your 2023 3A Lacrosse State Championship. Well done. Keep up the great work. Thank you all for joining us. Keep up that great work in the classroom, too. 4.24. I didn't know that was possible. Right. Thank you all. All right, we have another group from Severna Park.
Thank you, Mr. President. We also have the Severna Park boys lacrosse team. The 2023 Severna Park boys lacrosse team earned the program's 12th state championship and 7th in a row, both state records. They accomplished this while exemplifying the program's goal of developing student athletes into committed and compassionate young men with the skills necessary to make a positive difference in their lives and the world around them. Coach Dave Earle and the staff of Wilton Downs, Rich Davis, Jack Thomas, J.P. Gurley, and Colin Pastrana emphasize attention to detail, character, and commitment to the program's guiding principles through this historic run. I would ask the resolution be read in full.
The clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to Severna Park High School boys lacrosse in recognition of winning the Class 3A boys lacrosse state championship. We applaud your outstanding season and wish you many more. Congratulations. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on the 13th day of March, 2024.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. To the gentlemen of Severna Park High School boys lacrosse team, the Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates your 2023 Class 3A boys lacrosse state championship. Congratulations and well done. Excellent. Thank you all for joining us. Champions in the classroom, too. It's always important. Right. That makes more sense. Good. All right, let's go to the Vice Chair of Finance, Senator from District 8. Senator from District 8. We have a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, we've had champions come and go here this morning and yesterday, but let me just say, these are champions for our students in schools. They teach financial education, they do stock market games, and that's how I got involved with them. So I just can't say enough about, we've been fighting for financial education here in Annapolis and to put it in all of our schools, and they are fighters for that too. So, for my champions, on April 2nd is the 70th anniversary of the Maryland Council on Economic Education. MCEE serves teachers and students in Maryland to provide economics and personal finance, professional development, classroom resources, and hands-on learning programs. We thank you for your dedicated service to providing economics and personal finance to teachers and students in Maryland. Today we have Julie Weaver, the Executive Director, George Topher, Dr. Alan Cox, Flo Flatko, did I say right? Mary Metzler, Dawn Baker, and Michelle Coates. And so let's give a warm Senate welcome, and may the clerk please read the resolution.
The clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to the Maryland Council on Economic Education in recognition of MCEE's 70th anniversary. We thank you for your dedicated service providing economics and personal finance education to the teachers and students of Maryland. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 13th day of March, 2024.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. To the leadership of the Maryland Council on Economic Education, the Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates your 70 years of excellent work, and this former econ major deeply appreciates your excellent work. So thank you all and congratulations. All right, we have one more. Senator from the 41st, with a resolution.
Members of the Senate, it is my great and distinct pleasure to welcome and recognize the Pierians Incorporated. One of the founding members of this organization was none other than our former Senator Verda Welcome, and I am happy to be a proud member myself. And joining the group today is none other than the daughter of Verda Welcome, who we've seen before, Mary Welcome. On December the 13th, 1958, the Pierians Incorporated was founded in Baltimore, Maryland by Annette C. Johnson. Over these last 66 years, the organization has grown to have chapters nationally. What is unique about the Pierians, an organization devoted to enjoyment of the fine arts and encouraging the study of fine arts, the Pierians specifically recognizes local talent, African American talent in the arts, and offers scholarships to those recipients, is responsible for the careers, has launched the careers of many a great artist. And so Pierians is named for a fountain in Pieria, sacred to the Muses and believed to communicate poetic inspiration. Welcome, Pierians. I believe there's a resolution at the desk.
The clerk will read the resolution.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers sincerest congratulations to the Pierians in recognition of your dedication to bringing women together to promote the national theme of advancing the arts of the African American experience. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 13th day of March, 2024.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, can we make sure we get the senator from the 41st? Thank you very much. All right, clerk will take the call. To the Pierians, did I say that correctly? Pierians, the Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates your wonderful, wonderful work and congratulates you on advancing the arts of the African American experience. Thank you so much. We're so honored to have you back again in our chamber, and portrait is looking wonderful. Thank you. It's great to see you. Thank you. Please, no, you're always welcome. Excellent. All right. Let's see. Introductions. Guess. Chair recognizes Senator from District 4.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this morning I have the wonderful opportunity to pay respects to a very dear friend of mine today with us on the floor. Jason Keckler is my oldest friend, not by age, but since third grade. We've been very dear friends. So just a few years ago, we met. After high school, Jason went to college, I went in the military. We ended up coming back at the same time and ended up in the same police academy. Jason ended up serving 22 distinguished years with the Frederick Police Department and retired as a Frederick Police Captain. During his service to the community, he was very active in community engagement, epitomizing what we want to see in our police officers. And he was very active in the Student Homelessness Initiative program, hosting several fundraisers and golf tournaments to raise money for this very noteworthy cause. Currently, he is finishing up his 6th year as a Maryland Parole Commissioner. Colleagues, would you join me in celebrating a lifelong career service to our community and our state? If you would please stand, Jason. Jason Keckler, thank you.
Thank you for your service, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from District 10.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, today we've got a special group that's joining us today in the gallery. The high school students from across Maryland. They are visiting us as part of the Youth Congress Day made possible by the Maryland Business Roundtable for Education, that's the MBRT. For over 31 years, MBRT has served as the only statewide business group exclusively dedicated to strengthening K through 12 education and improving students' achievement and workforce preparedness. They directly support college and career readiness programs for economically disadvantaged high school students through initiatives such as Next Generation Scholars programs and established by HB 1403 in 2016 and HB 1245 in 2021. Youth Congress Day transports high school students to Annapolis to experience government in action and better understand how state leaders support their success. MBRT is all about creating opportunities, and today we have the chance to welcome these students and as potential leaders of tomorrow. So senators, join me in extending a warm welcome to our visitors. Let's make the Student Youth Day an inspiring and memorable experience. I don't know what percent they are of our present, but they are definitely 100% of our future. So let's welcome them. Thanks.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Great, great group. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from Montgomery County.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. President. I have two announcements today. I will try to be brief. Please. The first, you may have seen here, our doctor of the day is my dear friend and many of our dear friends from District 16, Dr. Stephen Rockhauer, who is the former president of MedChi and a retired orthopedic surgeon. Thank you for being here today. And then the second announcement is on behalf of the Irish Caucus. I was asked to make sure everyone knows they are invited to join the Irish Caucus for a St. Patrick's Day party at Galway Bay on Thursday, 8 to 11 p.m. Our very own Senate President is the Legislator of the Year, and all of the proceeds will go to Teach for America. So there's a $30 donation at the door for Irish food, open bar, and unlimited Guinness.
Well, thank you so much, Senator. Hope to see you there. No pressure, no pressure, no pressure. All right. Let's see. Other district chair recognizes Senator from District 40.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the gallery behind you, I'm going to ask Citywide Youth Development to please stand. In the gallery behind the president, colleagues, is Citywide Youth Development. They have several kids with them from city neighbors. Citywide Youth Development believe in fighting crime and violence through entrepreneurship. They teach young people manufacturing in our community. Please join me in giving them a warm Senate welcome to our chambers today.
Excellent.
In addition to Citywide Youth Development, we also have some young people here from Carver Vocational High School. Carver Vocational High School, named after George Washington Carver, who was a scientist, inventor, and educator. These young people are a part of a media team that is documenting the role of Pages here in Baltimore City to provide for a promotional video to get more young people from the city engaged in our PAGE program here in the Senate. So please join me in welcoming Michael Williams, who's their advisor, and students from Carver Vocational High School.
Wonderful. Fantastic. I did a quick video. I don't know if any of the current pages saw it. It was, I would say, not Hollywood-esque. It was. But we had great turnout this year. We got great pages. Thank you all for your work to help us promote it even further. So it's wonderful. Is Mr. Aziz up there? I owe him a call. He's doing great work. Excellent. All right. Any other further introductions? Senator from District 45.
Mr. President, we're also proud, honored to be joined by some other young scholars, the Associated Students, the Associated Congress of Baltimore City. These are our young scholars who are in the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th grade. They're navigating our process and representing all students for Baltimore City respectfully as they go through the governing body. They're here today to learn the process in reference to what we're doing. So if we can give a round of applause for the young scholars that's in the gallery, Associated Students of Congress of Baltimore City, please, colleagues, give a round of applause.
Welcome, welcome. We hope to show you the best of democracy today. We shall see. All right. Any further guests? Announcement from the minority leader?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. With permission,
Senator may proceed.
one of our colleagues for District 37, Senator Johnny Mounts, has been back and forth from Annapolis a lot, dealing with a very important challenge in his family, and that's the health of his mom. And Johnny is right where he needs to be right now, and that's with her. She's at the hospital. I'm looking at my colleague. Many of us met her over the summertime at Johnny's fundraiser back home, and she was just a joy to be with her. But she is facing some challenges right now. And I just ask that certainly while the work that we do down here is very important, there's nothing that's more important than being with your family during its most vulnerable time. So please keep Johnny, his mom, and his family in your prayers as we're proceeding with the day. Thank you.
Most certainly. Thank you, Senator, for that, and we wish him the best. I know it's tough. Thank you. All right. Any additional introductions before we jump in today? We have a very, very, very busy day today, so we'll see how far we can get. We'll do the best we can. So we consider the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. Let's start with message from the House. These are House bills. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 14, Chair, Ways and Means Committee, Election Law Revisions, Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Majority Leader moves so we consider the reading of the bills. They will be referred to their appropriate standing committees. We have a message from the executive. Clerk will read the message.
Dear President Ferguson, in accordance with Article 2, Section 13 of the Constitution of Maryland, I am pleased to submit the following appointment nominations for confirmation by the Maryland State Senate. These individuals bring exceptional knowledge and the ability to the offices for which they have been nominated. I'm confident they will provide the strength of experience and leadership to instill confidence among all of our residents, ensure we succeed in our commitment to leave no Marylander behind. I look forward to your favorable approval of the nominees. Thank you for your assistance and support. Sincerely, Wes Moore, Governor.
All right, message having been read is journalized. Will refer the names to the Standing Committee on Executive Nominations. All right, let's go ahead and start with our special order calendar. This is calendar 42, which if we could have the clerk read the bill and we'll ask the chairman of the committee to join us up front.
Senate Bill 360, the President Budget Bill Fiscal Year 2025. Question is on the adoption of the 147 committee amendments and the favorable report.
All right, the question is going to be on the 147 amendments. The chairman will do an excellent job working us through the amendments, and then we will take up any further amendments at that point.
Mr. President, before we start, I have a budget bill question.
Senator may proceed.
Is that in order?
Sure.
Thank you. So I've been working through the paper version, and I'm now in Senate Bill 360 online, and they don't mesh at all. And I'm just wondering if there's any coaching for me and for anyone else who's doing the same thing.
So there is a different rule for the budget that the reprint and the amendments can be drawn to. So in the rules, we have a separate process. It is different than every other bill. So is it about amendments that the senators can?
Which one should we be using? How do we follow along?
The paper version is the version that is appropriate on the printed paper version is the committee reprint.
The one with the gray cover.
That is the amendments. Then there's the actual bill itself, which is Senate Bill 360. Which the center should have, and they should be in alignment. So one has a listing of the amendments, the other has a listing of the other is the actual budget bill itself. Let's take a quick moment just to.
Mr. President?
Yes.
As we track with our chair, should it be the gray? Are you working from the gray cover or from the reprint, the white?
They should match. They should be both. It might be easier to follow through with the amendments because the amendments are listed 1 through 147 in the section that
That's the
has
gray
the
cover.
gray cover.
Thank you.
And they will be batched.
Yes.
So we're in the system, and thanks to Sally Robb, we're trying to look for the reprint. The reprint does not seem to be in the system, and so looking at the amendments, we're not able to follow along.
It should be on the website.
Should be is the operative word, Mr. President.
On
It
the Senate
doesn't seem
website,
to
on the
be.
Maryland General Assembly website, everything should be published.
It's above my pay grade.
And just take a second. We'll make sure we won't rush it.
Obviously, this is the most important bill of the session, Mr. President. I wonder if it makes any sense to lay it over for just a little bit while IT might be able to figure out how to make it accessible to us on our laptops, or not.
Well, let's see. We want to make sure we get through it here. Let's see if we can. All right, let's do this. We will special order for, if the Senator would like to special order for 15 minutes. We'll see where we are in 15 minutes.
That'll be fine. Thank you, Mr.
All right,
President.
any objections? Without objection, so ordered. The next bill is related, so if we could call that up as well, and then we'll entertain a similar motion. This is special order calendar number 43.
Senate Bill 362, the President Budget Reconciliation Financing Act of 2024. Question is on the adoption of the 35 committee amendments in the favorable report.
Recognize the chair of the committee.
Special order for 15 minutes.
All right, the motion is a special order. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Let's go to, let's go to the Finance Committee. Are we ready for calendar 24? We've got a lot of bills, so we're going to just check in today. We're going to be kind of bouncing around, make sure that we have floor reports for the bills that we have on the desk. All right, if we could go to, if the clerk could read the first bill.
Senate Bill 460, Senator Kagan, Unemployment Insurance Benefits, Election Judges, favorable with 2 amendments.
All right, Chair recognizes the Chair, Senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. The bill before you is a good bill to help encourage election judges, which we always need to have more of in the state. As amended, Senate Bill 460 allows an individual who is receiving unemployment insurance benefits to serve as an election judge without impacting their unemployment insurance benefits. The bill prohibits a payment to an individual made as compensation for serving as an election judge for a local board of elections in the state from being included when computing the wages required to be subtracted from an eligible claimant's weekly benefit amount. The bill also prohibits the denial of benefits for failure to meet the general requirement that an individual be able to work, available to work, and actively seeking employment. Amendment 1 makes changes to the purpose paragraph. Amendment 2 strikes provisions excluding compensation for serving as an election judge from the definition of wages. and instead adds that compensation to income that is to be disregarded for purposes of calculating an individual's weekly benefit amount. There is no fiscal impact. Mr. President, I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 460 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 718, Senator Lamb, Maryland Pathway to Nursing Pilot Program Advisory Committee Establishment, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, Senate Bill 718 establishes the Maryland Pathway to Nursing Pilot Program in the Maryland Higher Education Commission to provide practical and financial support to specified nursing students. The bill also establishes the Maryland Pathway to Nursing Advisory Committee with specified membership to assist the Secretary of Higher Education and in the implementation of the program. By December 15th of 2024 and annually thereafter, the Secretary must report to the Governor and the General Assembly on the implementation of the program. There are two amendments. The first amendment alters the purpose paragraph. Amendment 2 transfers oversight of the program from the Department of Health to the Higher Education Commission as described. Move the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 718 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 991, Senator Lamb, Behavioral Health Language Assistant Services Pilot Program, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 991 establishes the Language Assistance Services Pilot Program to, number one, provide meaningful access to behavioral health care to children with limited English proficiency, and number two, establish a competitive grant process for local behavioral health authorities to provide reimbursement to behavioral health providers for language assistance services. By October 1st of 2024, the Behavioral Health Administration must adopt regulations to implement and administer the program. In fiscal 2025 and 26, the governor must include $120,000 in the annual budget for the program. BHA must award at least three grants of $30,000 in fiscal 25 and 26. The bill terminates after 4 years. There are no committee amendments. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 991 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1005, Senator Hayes, Economic Development West North Avenue Development Authority alterations, favorable.
West North Avenue. Do we have the bill sponsor? Do we want to special order this to the end of the...
I can take it.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Senate Bill 1005 is an economic development bill setting up the authority at West North Avenue Development Authority, and it removes the sunset and allows them to have a committee to work on economic development for the West North Avenue. Let me see if there were amendments.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee amendment. Any discussion? Any objections?
Actually, there were no amendments, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
On the report, any objections to the report? Without objection, the report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title, or any amendments at all? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1005 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. We're ready? Let's give it just. Okay, let's go to AAA if we can for education, energy, and the environment.
25.
As we're here, I know the senator from District 1. We are very pleased to be joined behind us with Leadership Allegheny, which are leaders from Allegheny County. If they could rise and if we could please give them a warm Senate welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. All right, so 26, 25, let's go with 25 here. Education, energy, and the environment. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 261, Education, Energy, and the Environment, Chair, State Board of Barbers, Sunset Extension, favorable, 2 amendments.
Our floor leader is off the floor on this one as well. Mr.
All right,
President,
if we, how about we...
can we maybe put this to the end of this particular?
calendar?
We
If
can move to
special
some of the
order,
other
Senators
bills.
Move to special
from
order
Triple E.
the bill to the end of this calendar? All of the calendar?
No, just the next, with this number 25 and Triple E, just maybe, hopefully we can recruit floor leader back on the floor before the end of number 25.
All right, that
report
works.
Number 25.
Any objections?
Actually, here, strike that. We've
Okay,
got
we'll withdraw the
a
motion.
replacement floor leader that's going to handle this very skillfully. So can we go?
Okay.
Okay, we're good. Everything is completely under control here, and we are going to go to
Everyone
the
know
vice
the meme
chair
of the
Correct.
dog with the sitting there. It's fine with the fire and flames blaring. It's totally fine.
We are all good. Back to Senate Bill 261, Mr.
Chair
President.
recognizes the vice chair as the floor leader.
Absolutely. So let me just give an overview of the 5 bills. There are professional boards that are overseen in the Health Department that are now in the Finance Committee. These are from the Department of Labor. They have been coming up for 10-year sunsets. And the challenge that the committee had, or the concerns, was there's not enough oversight, and 10 years seemed like a long time. So there is language in each of the next 5 bills as we give them an extension to a sunset, a modest extension, that we're going to ask the Office of Legislative Audits and the oversight folks to take a quick look and make sure that these are all functioning the way they should be. So these are essentially identical with slightly different years on some of them. So I just wanted to give you the overview. So Senate Bill 261, which deals with barbers, 2 committee amendments, and we extend the termination date to 2027. We give them 3 years, require that a report be delivered to us by July 1 of 2025 from the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee. I move adoption of the committee amendments, the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 261 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 264, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, State Board of Cosmetologists, Sunset Extension, favorable, 2 amendments.
Recognizing the vice chair as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, we're going to propose to extend their sunset to 2027, ask for the same oversight report, move adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 264 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 288, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, State Board of Individual Tax Preparers, Sunset Extension, favorable, 2 amendments.
Recognizing the vice chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, we are proposing to extend the sunset to 2027, ask for the report. So I move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 288 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. When I was speaking with Leadership Allegheny earlier today, they were like, nothing really happened on the Senate floor. Normally it's not like this. We're in administrative mode at the moment, moving sunset evaluations along. So we will have the budget here shortly, and that'll be more interesting, potentially. Not that these aren't interesting, of course. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 296, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, State Board for Professional Land Surveyors, Sunset Extension, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the vice chair.
Mr. President, I think Leadership Allegheny would be fascinated by land surveyors, actually. And so we are proposing once again to extend the sunset to 2027 and ask for the report. So move adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 296 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 307, Chair Education, Energy and Environment Committee, Public Safety Board of Boiler Rules, sunset extension, favorable with 2 amendments.
Back to the Vice Chair.
Just to keep you all on your toes, the boiler rules have a different sunset extension. Ooh. So we are proposing to extend them to 2029. And again, the same report to us. Move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report.
All right. Floor Leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 307 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 416, Senator Lewis Young, Renewable Energy Customer Sited Solar Program, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing Senator from District 3 is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill establishes the customer-sited solar program within the Maryland Energy Administration to provide grants to electric companies or a third party applying for a grant on behalf of a customer. This would be used for new solar energy generating systems funded by specific reallocated revenues from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. I will refer to that going forward as SIFE. The bill also establishes that MEA's discretion can be used for a certain percentage of specified SIFE revenues could be used for grants to households with low to moderate income to repair, improve, or modernize a house for installation of a solar energy generating system. There are 2 amendments. The first is technical. The second significantly alters the bill. It delays implementation of the bill's provisions, narrows the scope of the bill to income-verified individuals who earn at or below 150% of the state median income, and it allows up to 10% of the Solar Alternative Compliance Program to be used for MEA administrative expenses, and 20% to be used for program funds, and adds comprehensive consumer protection policies for energy generating system contracts. The other thing that the Second Amendment does is it totally wipes out the fiscal note. It brings it down to 0. That was affirmed in testimony yesterday by a member of MEA. And as I mentioned, because the Second Amendment also allows for some administrative expenses in this more narrowed scope, that's another reason why the fiscal note is 0. Therefore, I move for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The floor leader would yield for a question.
Senator may
please.
proceed.
Certainly.
With respect to the amendments, the fiscal note originally had, I think it was like $1.2 million to fund MEA, and you said that that goes away now?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, because the original bill had 3 tiers. It would have gone well beyond low and moderate income individuals and would have pretty much opened it to higher earning individuals. So the real intent of this program was to give low and moderate income individuals, households, the opportunity to participate in solar, because our personal solar growth has been flat over the last couple of years. So when we reduced the tiers from 3 to 1, totally reduced the administrative costs on the part of the MEA. They now can handle the administrative costs with existing resources.
Okay, and when you said three tiers to one, that was low and moderate income, that was location. What were the 3 tiers?
The second tier was if you lived in a low to moderate income community,
Right.
but your particular household was not low to moderate. And the third tier pretty much opened it up to everyone.
Okay. There was also language that would allow some of the CEF fund, because this is all being funded by CEF, right?
Correct.
That was allowed some of that through this new fund to be used to renovate roof structures. Is that still in place?
Yes.
So that, and that was.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I misunderstood. No,
Okay.
it's not.
So you took that out. That money couldn't go towards the renovation of a roof prior to installing solar.
Well, it can be used for grants for households with low to moderate income to repair, improve, or modernize a house for installation. So I would assume that would apply to roofs.
Okay, I thought it was pretty specific, but I was looking. There's one other question. This also talked a lot about, you want to respond?
Yeah, the grants only apply to installation for solar and the repairs needed for installation of solar.
So it would have to be direct repairs, but it could be specific to the roof structure. If a solar installer came out and said that you've got problems with the roof and they don't want to do a bad job, they would recommend that the roof needs to be done as well too. This would offer money to allow that to happen.
That's my understanding.
Okay. And then
Correct.
third, it said something about a third party could apply for these funds. What specifically is that?
Well, for someone that actually does the installation, they could assist the customer in applying for the funds.
Okay, so in a sense, the contractor in a sense could be the one that does. I think that's how we do Empower as well too. So,
right.
Okay, thank you. But Mr. President, could I just lay over the bill and the amendments under the rule, please? Thank you very much for your response.
Move to
You're
lay the bill
welcome.
over under the rule. The motion is order, and the bill and the amendments will lie over under the rule.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 906, Center Augustine Housing and Community Development, Conversion of Commercial Buildings for Residential Use, report favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we know that we are in the midst of a housing crisis and that we are short on the number of units that we have for housing. We are also aware that the commercial markets have changed significantly and that our worlds have changed post-pandemic and that folks are not utilizing some of the commercial space in the same way. And so what this bill aims to do is to get an inventory of that so that we can see whether or not it makes sense to convert it to residential use. The bill requires by January 1st, 2025, each county in Baltimore City to inventory the number of vacant commercial buildings in the county or Baltimore City, develop a plan for converting vacant commercial buildings in the county or Baltimore City for residential use, and submit a report containing the inventory and plan to the Department of Housing and Community Development. Each county in Baltimore City must update the report every 2 years as specified by the Department of Housing and Community Development, must establish and maintain a database of vacant commercial buildings in the state that have the potential to be converted for residential use. The bill takes effect July 1st, 2024. There are 2 committee amendments. The first is technical. The second defines a vacant commercial building, requires counties and municipalities to submit a report, requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to provide technical assistance upon request, and requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to adopt regulations for future use of vacant commercial properties. I move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amendment report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the? Yes, Senator has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the floor leader's amendment. Give us just a moment, Senator, for us to get this distributed. All right, we're giving the pages a workout this week, getting the steps in. This is a complicated one. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is simply a sponsor amendment. I move it's obviously a friendly one, and I move the amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Any objections? Without objections, the amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 906 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 959, Senator Feldman, Electricity Tariffs, Distributed Energy Resources, Electric Distribution System, Support Services, Distributed Renewable Integration, and Vehicle Electrification, the DRIVE Act. Favorable, 2 amendments.
Recognizing Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a pretty technical bill, but a pretty significant bill, Mr. President. We've spent a lot of time in the General Assembly over the last few years discussing grid capacity, resiliency, and policies, how we can reduce the cost of living in our state. And so this Bill 959 addresses all these issues in 3 innovative ways. We're trying to reduce stress to the grid, but we're also trying to save money for Marylanders in terms of their energy bills. Usually these kinds of innovative measures draw some opposition. This bill essentially was unopposed and actually passed the Triple E Committee unanimously. With that said, what the piece of legislation does requires the Public Service Commission to adopt a transition plan to require each electric company to transition each customer to a time of use model by September 1st, 2028. Just to educate the committee a little, my colleagues a little bit, there's 20 other states using this kind of variable pricing model. Energy costs more certain times of the day, cheaper and other types of the day. And so this model, using all of our good smart meter technology, will allow you to use your energy in a way that takes advantage of energy use during cheaper times. You can do your laundry in the middle of the night or whatever the case may be, and you can modify your behavior to take advantage of cheaper energy. And so that's what time of use is. Again, we've got 4 states utilizing this full time, 20 states are exploring it, so that's number 1. Number 2, adopts regulations to establish an expedited process for interconnecting bi-directional electric vehicle systems to the grid and into your home. What that is, we now have cars on the market, electric vehicles, which will allow you, when you're doing EV in your house at the home, to actually use that energy as a backup for your home. And ultimately, in some states, the technology, we've got 2 cars on the market, will allow you to feed some of that electricity back into the grid. This is pretty innovative stuff. It's happening around the country, and that second part will allow requires the PSC to adopt regulations to put that in play. And then thirdly, it would develop a program for each electric company to establish a pilot program to compensate owners and aggregators, sort of the same point I was just making, distributed energy resources for electric distribution system support services. The PSC may also approve or require electric company to offer upfront incentives or rebates to customers to acquire and install renewable on-site generating systems. So for example, if you have rooftop solar feeding into your basement to a big battery, this will allow, ultimately, when the technology is in place, to sell some of that extra electricity back to the grid. Again, reducing stress, making a few dollars for yourself. And again, this is where the country's going. And then there's some other provisions in the bill. There were 2 amendments. First amendment's technical. The Second Amendment does convert this to an opt-in process. The bill as introduced was opt-out. This now will move this to an opt-in mechanism. It started as a opt-out, and so under the bill, electric companies will have until July 1, 2025 to file one of these time of use plans with the Public Service Commission. And under that plan, they'll propose reasonable target enrollments to achieve the goals by 2028. There will be reports in the process during that time about what it might look like to convert at some point, maybe in 2028, to an opt-out program. So that's in the bill. The bill clarifies that it's only applying to investor-owned utilities. The municipalities are not required to participate in this program, but they may if they so choose. And there's several other, I would characterize as technical provisions of the bill. But again, bottom line, Mr. President, this is innovative. It's happening around the country. It will help you reduce your energy bill, but at the same time, reduce stress on the grid. So for all those reasons, Mr. President, and the bill did pass unanimously out of the committee. So with that backdrop, I would move for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Let's Minority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if I could ask the floor leader to yield for a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
Senator may proceed.
So this is a very interesting issue, and you talked about how this is where the industry is going. So there's 4 states that have done something like this and several others that are considering it, correct?
Okay, well, that's true, and then 20 other states are actually looking at it, states like Texas and others. In fact, when I was talking about actually making some money, Texas is actually well ahead of us. Folks are actually making money being able to sell some of their extra electrons back into the grid. So that's true. I will say on a pilot basis, we've actually had 3 of our utilities experimenting with some variation of the time of use model already. And the PSC's been looking at it, PJM's looking at it, the FERC is looking at it, because again, it sort of makes sense. Right now, I should have made this point, the way we do get an energy bill is very inefficient and rudimentary. The fact is, some time of the day, energy costs more. And we used to not have smart meter technology that allows the free flow of information about when folks are using energy, what the cost is. Now we have that technology and infrastructure in place, and this, at least with the time of use component of the bill, is allowing us to utilize that information in a way that will ultimately help you change your behavior so you can save money on your energy bill, right? It used to be you just, every month, they would calculate a total amount of energy, plug it into some inefficient model, and then you would pay whatever you owe at the end of the month on your energy bill.
A couple of questions on that point about going to the time of use model, changing folks' behavior. Number one, we have a lot of areas of the state, or some areas of the state still, that don't have smart meters. And so what does this do? You said it's an opt-in, not an opt-out. How do you opt in if you don't have a smart meter?
Well, you know, that it's not, admittedly, to your point, when you look at the entire state, I think the vast majority at this point, I think that argument would have been a little more compelling 10, 15 years ago. I would say the vast majority of the state have advanced smart meters. Are there places in the state where we're not there yet? That is true. I don't have a map that I can tell you. I can say that we're relative to where we were 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. But of course, that would be true of all the other 20 states that are exploring that. It's not perfect.
Please don't misunderstand, Mr. President. I'm not necessarily saying that means it's not a good idea. I guess I'm asking what just functionally how this works. If folks, because some folks may have the ability to get a smart meter but don't have one. Like for example, in my house, I have a smart meter on one floor but not the other, two-tiered thing. So what is there a? Will people be, just to see if people will be able to, would you, I guess you would need to get a smart meter in order to opt into this?
I think my understanding is that this works most efficiently with the advanced smart meter technology where the information's flowing both ways. And so, you know, it's a legitimate point. And
Yeah, so going further to the behavior changing part, just so I understand more about, and so people that don't know much about this issue understand more about the time, what's the time of use, or I'm not saying the right term, but
it is time of use rates.
Yeah, time
it's
of use
basically a
rates.
variable pricing model.
Right. And that actually makes sense to me in some ways, but is this going to set up where there's nothing in here that says that the energy company or our eventual state mandates, or the ones we have about energy usage, they're not going to have a situation where this is going to require electric companies to then tell customers, you can't use energy at this time, or you can't use as much energy at this time. There's nothing in the bill about that, correct?
Well, again, that one of the reasons we converted from opt-out to opt-in, nobody's being forced to even participate in the program. And, you know, and so I think that in and of itself kind of addresses part of what, but back to your broader point, no, I don't think there's anything in this bill that is envisioning anything along the lines you're describing.
Yeah, okay, so so this is trying to get people, if you opt into this program, the goal would be for you to be in a situation where functionally how it works is the electric company you're using is going to say it's more, your electricity is more expensive at this time of day. So if you want to get on a plan that turns your thermostat up at a certain time or turns it down at a certain time, as the case may be, depending on the season, you can do that as opting into a plan that the energy company can help you come up with. Is that
exactly?
Am I speaking?
That I think is the premise of the thing. You'll have the information available that you can then say, again, I think I mentioned earlier, you can do your laundry at the time of the day when it costs the less to do it. Right now, we don't really have that set up, so this sort of opens that whole thing up.
Thank you. That's helpful, and I'm glad it's an opt-in. I think, look, I mean, anytime I get that message from BGE telling me it's an energy day, you know, we try to suffer through the hot so we can get a few bucks back on our bill. So I don't think that's a bad idea.
But I will say that between 2025 and 2028, there will be some analysis about if we wanted to convert to an opt-out program at some point, what would be involved, you know, but we're not there in this bill, but it does provide some kind of reporting and analysis of that possibility down the road.
And is this for commercial as well, or are we just doing residential right now in this bill? Or is the bill sort of silent on that?
Yeah, everybody. So, you know, if you're a business, this could be a business, a cost saver for you. So everybody has an opportunity to opt in and take advantage of this.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. President, I actually, the answers are great. I think we have a couple people want to take a closer look at this, so I'd ask that the bill and the amendments lie over under the rule.
All right, the senator has moved to lay the bill over under the rule. The motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule. All right, let's go. If we had a little bit of
Mr. President.
Oh yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th district.
Thank you. We're in a break with
Sarah, may
calendars,
proceed.
and I just wanted my colleagues to join me. We have Chrisfield Mayor Darlene Taylor here with a special guest, Lamont Bell. He's a Somerset County student with the Maryland Business Roundtable, and if they could stand, if we could welcome them. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for trekking over the bridge with us to join us today. Chair recognizes the senator from District 10.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I got a little ahead of myself earlier, but I want to acknowledge the Maryland Business Roundtable, their Youth Congress Day, and today we've got a special group joining us in the gallery behind me, the high school students from across Maryland. They're visiting us for Youth Congress Day, made possible by the Maryland Business Roundtable for education, and we call it MBRT. For over 31 years, MBRT has served as the only statewide business group exclusively dedicated to strengthening K through 12 education and improving students' achievement and workforce preparedness. They directly support colleges and career readiness programs for economically disadvantaged high school students through initiatives such as Next Generation Scholars programs established by House Bill 1403 in 2016 and House Bill 1245 in 2021. Youth Congress Day transports high school students to Annapolis to experience government in action and better understand how state leaders support their success. Yeah, so I ask again to join me in welcoming them. Thanks.
Welcome to the MBRT and the students who are joining. Thank you for being with us today. All right, we are going to jump back into the budget action. If we could have the clerk call the bill.
Senate Bill 360, the President Budget Bill, Fiscal Year 2025. Question is in the adoption of the 147 committee amendments and the favorable report.
All right. Before we recognize, if the chair could join us, we had just a technical. It was in a slightly different place than normal, the reprint. So, senators, on the floor system, if senators were to hit menu and then operating budget in the top tab is budget bill report, and then it has the Senate reprint budget bill is the reprinted bill under consideration. So it is there, and we had a little bit of it was a Grapefruit League spring training. Now we are ready for opening day with the Chairman of Budget and Tax.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. All right. So as was mentioned, the Budget Committee recommends 147 amendments to the budget. These amendments are indicated in the committee reprint and in the committee report that was distributed on Monday, and then now we know about the computer issues. The budget is linked to Senate Bill 362, the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, to maintain a balanced budget in fiscal 2024 and 25. As I mentioned the other day, just big picture, so the $63 billion budget. It reduces total spending from last year by 1.8% and the general fund spending by $1.5 billion, which is a 5% reduction. The budget meets the spending affordability recommendations, leaving over $2.4 billion in cash reserves, including $141 million in general fund balance. I'll now turn to the committee amendments, which are marked in the committee report and indicated in the committee reprint. I will introduce the amendments in groups. After describing the amendments, I will then move for each group to be adopted. If any member has any concerns about a specific amendment, please ask to have that amendment separated for debate. As in the past, I ask members to hold additional amendments until the committee amendments have been considered. Please keep in mind that any amendments are to be drawn to the committee reprint, and we've already been through that. And I want to say, first off, I'm very grateful to the minority for providing the amendments that they are interested in introducing, and we've had a chance to review them, and we appreciate that greatly. Okay, with your permission, Mr. President, let me now turn to the first group of amendments.
Senator may proceed.
Okay. Amendments 1 through 8 pertain to the judiciary. In the judiciary, Amendment 1 and through 3 reduce general funds, and Amendment 4 restricts funding in the Office of the Public Defender. Amendment 5 adds language restricting funds to be used only to increase salaries for existing positions. In the Uninsured Employees Fund, Amendment 6 restricts funding pending resolution of the audit findings. In Historic St. Mary's City Commission, Amendment 7 restricts funding pending a report, and the Governor's Office of Children and Youth Amendment 8 is technical. Move adoption of amendments 1 through 8.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of committee amendments 1 through 8. Are there any amendments that senators wish to separate to discuss separately? Any objections to committee amendments 1 through 8? Without objection, the amendments are adopted. Senator may proceed.
Amendments 9 through 18 pertain to the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, the Maryland Commission for African American History and Culture, and the Interagency Commission on School Construction. In the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, Amendments 9 and 15 restrict funds pending a report. Amendments 10 and 14 reduce general funds. Amendment 11 transfers funds contingent on legislation. Amendment 12 restricts funds pending certain documents, and Amendment 13 restricts funds pending certain attestations. Got it. In the Maryland Commission for African American History and Culture, Amendment 16 reduces double budgeted funds. In the Capital Appropriation Interagency Commission for School Construction, Amendment 17 strikes language, and Amendment 18 adds language expressing intent. Move adoption of amendments 9 through 18.
All right. Floor Leader has moved for the adoption of committee amendments 9 through 18. Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question. As we're going through all of this, and you're going specifically through the amendment areas, is this the appropriate time to ask questions for anything that's within that that group of amendments, or are we going to accept all the amendments and then we can go back?
Now would be the appropriate time for that group. So if there's a specific amendment that the senator wants to pull out, we can address it separately, or have it vote separately or discuss separately.
Even if one of the amendments doesn't reference it, so I might have missed in the last group of amendments where there was talk about the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, but it wasn't amended. So my question is, if I wanted to ask a question in reference to that, do I wait until the amendments are all accepted, or how do you want to do that?
Yes, sir, I think that makes sense. If it's not one of the amendments in the amendment language, if it was not amended,
right,
it is probably easiest for us to take up and adopt the amendments, and then we'll still have the favorable report before we take up any other.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Uh-huh. All right, so the question remains on amendments 9 through 18. Any discussion or separations? Any objections to amendments 9 through 18? Without objection, the amendments are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Amendments 19 through 24 pertain to the Department of Planning and the West North Avenue Development Authority, the Comptroller, and the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. In the Department of Planning, Amendment 19 restricts funds to be used in a certain manner. In the West North Avenue Development Authority, Amendment 20 restricts funds pending a report. In the Comptroller, Amendment 21 reduces double budgeted funds. In the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, Amendments 22 through 24 restrict funds pending submission of reports. Move adoption of Amendments 19 through 24.
The chairman moves for the adoption of amendments 19 through 24. Are there any amendments that senators wish to separate or discuss separately? Are there any objections? Without objection, amendments 19 through 24 are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
Okay, amendments 25 through 37 pertain to the Department of Budget Management, the Department of Information Technology, the State Retirement Agency, and the Department of General Services. In the Department of Budget and Management, amendments 25 through 27 restrict funds pending submission of reports. Amendments 28 and 29 reduce funding due to vacancy savings and to lower a supplemental payment. Amendment 30 strikes language in the Department of Information Technology. Amendments 31 through 33 and Amendment 35 restrict funds pending submission of certain documents in a report. Amendment 34 reduces general funds in the State Retirement Agency. Amendment 36 reduces double budgeted funds, and in the Department of General Services, Amendment 37 restricts funds pending submission of a report. Move adoption of Amendments 25 through 37.
The chairman moves to the adoptions of amendments 25 through 37. Are there any separations or amendments to be discussed separately? Are there any objections? Without objection, amendments 25 through 37 are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
Amendments 38 through 46 pertain to the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, the Maryland Department of Transportation, the Maryland Transit Administration, the Department of Natural Resources. In the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, amendments 38 and 39 reduce general funds. In the Maryland Department of Transportation, amendments 40 and 42 add language requiring modification of changes to the capital program or capital grants. Amendment 41 restricts funding for grants to the amount budgeted. Amendments 43 and 44 set debt limits and require reports on non-traditional debt issuances. Amendment 45 restricts funds pending a report. In the Department of Natural Resources, Amendment 46 reduces funds for personnel costs contingent on legislation. Move adoption of amendments 38 through 46.
The chairman moves for the adoption of amendments 38 through 46. Any discussion or amendments to be discussed separately? Any objections? Without objection, amendments 38 through 46 are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Amendments 47 through 73 pertain to the Maryland Department of Health. In the Maryland Department of Health, amendments 47 through 50, 52 through 55, 62, and 63 restrict funds pending submissions of reports. In the Prevention and Health Promotion Administration, Amendment 51 reduces funds and amends language making the remaining funds contingent on legislation. Amendments 56, 57, 65, and 66 are technical. Amendments 58, 60, 61, 67, 69, and 70 add language restricting funds to their intended purposes. Amendment 59 adds language making funding contingent on legislation. Amendment 64 restricts funds pending resolution of audit findings. Amendment 68 reduces double budgeted funds. In the Health Regulatory Commission, Amendment 71 restricts funds pending submission of report. And Amendments 72 and 73 add language expressing intent. Move adoption of Amendments 47 through 73.
Chairman moves to the adoption of Amendments 47 through 73. Appears the HHS committee did some work here. 47 through
Always do.
73. Any discussion of separate amendments? If not, any objections? Without objection, Amendments 47 through 73 are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. 74 through 91 pertain to the Department of Human Services, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. In the Department of Human Services, Amendments 74, 75, and 77 restrict funds pending reports. Amendments 76, 79, and 80 restrict funds for foster care maintenance payments, child welfare services, and assistance payments to those purposes. Amendment 78 restricts funds for a grant and request a report. Amendments 81 and 83 require certain funds to be transferred to a different departmental program. Amendments 82, 84, 85 reduce funds in the Department of Labor. Amendment 86 deletes special funds that were included in error in the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Amendments 87 through 91 restrict funds pending reports. Move adoption of Amendments 74 through 91.
All right, the chairman moves that we adopt Amendments 74 through 91. Are there any amendments that senators wish to discuss separately? Any objections to Amendments 74 through 91? Without objection, the amendments are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Amendments 92 to 107 pertain to the Maryland State Department of Education, the Accountability and Implementation Board, the Maryland Higher Education Commission, and the Maryland School for the Deaf. In the Maryland State Department of Education, Amendments 92 and 93 restrict funds pending reports. Amendment 94 restricts funds pending a memorandum of understanding. Amendments 95 and 96 amend language determining eligibility for funds. Amendment 97 amends the eligibility of non-public schools and the aid for non-public schools. Amendment 98 restricts a certain amount of funds in the BOOST program. In the Maryland Center for School Safety, Amendment 99 reduces funds in the Accountability and Implementation Board. Amendment 100 restricts funds pending a report. In the Maryland Higher Education Commission, Amendments 101 through 103 restrict funds pending reports. Amendments 104 and 105 reduce funds for the Sullivan program, strike language making the reduction contingent on legislation, and specify that allocation of funds in the program. Amendment 106 amends language in the Maryland School for the Deaf. Amendment 107 restricts funds pending a report.
All right, the chairman moves for the adoption of Amendments 92 through 107. On the amendments, Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee, or Senator from Montgomery County.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chair, I just have a question about amendment number 97. It is on lines 24 through 34. It's number 10. And I just wonder if you could explain the policy thinking and prioritizing of the second half of that, of number 10. For students who are receiving a BOOST program scholarship for the first time, priority shall be given to students who attended public schools in the prior school year. I'm so curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, this was the exact language from last year's budget agreement, and it has been carried over this year. Obviously, we had quite an extended discussion last year with the House, and this was part of the overall compromise.
I'm not asking about the big picture of Boost, which, as you know, I have grave concerns about because I prioritize our public schools. I'm just curious why someone who just came to a non-public school from a public school, why would they get prioritized?
I have to pull it up, sorry.
All good. It's on page, it's number 97. It's on page 156. And it's number 10 in the book, 181. My seatmate says 181. If it's number 10.
First-time priority to kids from public schools rather than kids who are already in the private school. I was trying to give people an opportunity to go to private school who weren't already there.
I mean, this was, again, part of that compromise to give students who weren't already there in public schools an opportunity to be in private schools, should they choose to be.
But this is a program that's being phased out by this governor. So we're getting them hooked on funding
Well, I mean,
that's going to go away?
I mean, let's be clear, we still have the $9 million in this program.
Yes.
And this is the compromise that we're in, the situation we're in right now. And
Okay, I'm hearing compromise. Thank you,
That's
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, question remains on amendments 92 through 107. Chair recognizes the senator from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Mr. President. On amendment number 106, page 191, we're reducing funds to the community colleges. Is this going to be a permanent reduction? Is that how I'm reading this? That we're contingent upon the enactment of legislation reducing the K formula grants to community colleges?
So, and if there, which,
yes, the BRFA does make, when we get to that, it will
Okay.
make the cut permanent and establish that level. It's 27.2.
Yeah.
No, the percentage point is 27.2.
Instead of
Well,
29?
Correct.
Can I pull that amendment out to vote separately?
Sure.
yes, however, this one is, that would be in the next, that would be in the.
It's the BRFA that takes the action, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. In committee, still before us are committee amendments 92 through 107. 92 through 107. Any objections to the adoption of 92 through 107? Without objection, so ordered. Chairman may continue.
Okay. This is on amendments 108 through 115. They pertain to the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Department of Commerce, and the Maryland Department of the Environment, and the Department of Juvenile Services. In the Department of Housing and Community Development, Amendment 108 deletes funds that were double budgeted, and Amendment 109 reduces funds that strikes language. In the Department of Commerce, Amendment 110 reduces personnel expenditures. Amendment 111 is technical. Amendment 112 restricts funds in the Preservation of Cultural Arts program to be used for certain grants. In the Maryland Department of the Environment, Amendment 13 restricts funding pending a letter. In the Department of Juvenile Services, Amendments 114 and 115 restrict funds pending reports. Move adoption of the amendments 108 through 115.
All right. The chairman moves for the adoption of amendments 108 to 115. Are there any senators any desire to separate any of the amendments? Any objection to any of the amendments? Without objection, amendments 108 through 115 are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
Amendments 116 through 124 pertain to the Department of State Police, the State Reserve Fund, and the deficiency appropriations. In the Department of State Police, Amendment 116 reduces incorrectly budgeted funds. In the State Reserve Fund, Amendments 117 and 118 delete 3 appropriations, make a technical amendment, and strike the language. In the Dedicated Purpose Account, Amendment 119 restricts funding pending a report. Amendment 120 adds language making an appropriation contingent on legislation. Amendments 121 and 122 restrict efficiency appropriations for behavioral health services for that purpose. Amendments 129, 124, reduced efficiency appropriations. Move adoption of the amendments 116 through 124.
All right, the chairman has moved for the adoption of amendments 116 through 124. Any discussion or desires to separate? Any objections? Without objection, the committee amendments 116 through 124 are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
Amendments 125 through 147 pertain to the back of the bill sections. Amendment 125 and 126 add annual language. Amendment 127 reduces the fiscal 2024 funding in various agencies. Amendment 128 and 129 add funds for various purposes. Amendment 130 through 137 add annual language concerning the fiscal 2026 budget submission and budget process and the maintenance of certain accounting systems. Amendment 138 requires certain notifications. Amendment 139 authorizes the transfer of rainy day funds to cover certain shortfalls in entitlement programs. Amendment 140 and 141 establish reporting and other requirements related to personnel. Amendments 145 and 46 restrict funds in various agencies pending reports. Amendment 147 is technical. Move adoption of the amendments 125 through 147.
The chairman moves to the adoption of committee amendments 125 through 147. Any discussion or desires to separate? Any objections? Without objection, amendments 125 through 147 are adopted. So with all of the committee amendments having been adopted, the question now before the body is on the favorable report as amended. Chair recognizes the minority leader on the favorable report of the budget. The minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I guess I can ask the floor leader to yield for questioning.
Sure.
There's been, the committee has done extensive work on this budget, and the top lines of the budget for this year we actually are spending less than last year, which always makes me feel good about thinking about the budget. A lot of that's because of federal dollars that we're not spending, but we know, we all have seen the storm clouds on the horizon, and we know that there's been some disagreement we've seen out from some of our fellow elected officials in other places, and maybe even some from the other body about what we do about a looming problem of deficits in the future. And I guess what I wanted to see if I could just share my perspective and ask for yours is, we've had proposals to make very large increases in taxes from not really coming from this body, but from the other body and other folks out in the world, in our political world. It's my contention, and I'd love for you to maybe tell me that I'm wrong, but it's my contention that we really, as we look at out-year deficits, we've got about a 10-year commitment for Kirwan left, or are we in year 1 of 10, or are we in, that's my first question, are we in year 1 of the 10 years, are we in year 2?
It's through 2034.
It's 34. It's for FY 2034.
Yeah, we had
so
a delay, as you may recall.
Well, sure, no, with the pandemic, of course. So
And
we're
the veto.
so we're well, yes, the veto, because that's right. It was vetoed because we passed a giant mandate going into a worldwide pandemic, which I think the veto probably was wise, but the body disagreed, and here we are. So we got about, so basically we've got about 10 calendar years left of Kirwan, is fair to say. Okay. As we look at the out-year budget deficits, multiplying up to probably about $3 billion, it looks like, in the future, wouldn't it be strategically smarter for us to say, how could we elongate Kirwan, not cut money, but just take a little longer to get where we want to go? That would allow us, largely by taking an effect to slow roll it a little bit longer, would wipe away a large part of that deficit, or perhaps all of it. Wouldn't that be a smarter or perhaps a better decision to make on behalf of keeping our tax rates where they are, making sure we're not adding burden to our taxpayers. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the philosophy there? And in this budget, we could have done it in this budget, although we're talking about this year's budget, but this is, in the next couple of years particularly, we're going to need to make these kind of decisions. I don't know if you could comment on that.
Right. Well, I mean, I think some of you have heard me say this before. Budgeting can't ever really be looked at for the 1 year, right? It doesn't make sense. It's a data point in the middle of it all. It's important. We have to get it right. We have to balance it in that year. But in the committee, we spend a lot of time actually looking back and forward and on the year that we're dealing with. And if we look back and as a starting place, we've, I believe, been extraordinarily responsible in the fact that we put money away, both in the rainy day fund, and we have the largest rainy day fund I think the state has ever had, and additionally, on multiple occasions over the last couple of years, we put away nearly $1 billion each, I believe, 900 million into the Blueprint Fund. And the point of that was, as we think about handling an extraordinary step of taking this this effort of thinking about, you know, changing the lives of children all across the state, that we have to think about it in the long term. We have to plan it out, and we started doing that before, and we're at that point now where we not only this year, but even into next year, we have all the funding that we need to fully execute the mandates that are part of Kerwin. And so I guess at the bottom line of your question is, well, are you thinking about the future? Well, of course, we're thinking about the future, but we're taking things as they come. We're taking, this year, we got 2 surprises in the budget that ended up having a $500 million problem for us. Things happen over the course of a year. And so we're always looking about how we're going to meet our responsibilities in the coming years, knowing that there are things that could change. We've prepared for as much as we can in terms of putting money aside, and now we're looking towards the future, and we'll be looking at all aspects of what it will take to implement the Kerwin program.
Thank you for that answer, and Mr. President, I agree the chairman and the committee have worked at the last couple years. I've been, you know, personally, just speaking for myself, very, you know, impressed that trying to look at how can we leverage the dollars we have. We don't want to add tax burden. We're trying to evaluate, it sounds like, based even on some of the amendments we've gone through, trying to evaluate all programs and make sure that, you know, we're getting good bang for our buck and questioning some things and getting some answers back. So I think that's all great, and I appreciate the approach this year of saying, we can handle what we've got with existing resources, and I definitely agree. So I'm glad about that. I think if I could drill down on one point about why I'm bringing up Kerwin and maybe elongating the process a little bit is, you talked about changing lives. The answer was about changing lives of students. In no way should we slow down reforms that are good. But at the same time, I think we have to consider as a General Assembly and as a state, always saying that the way to change lives and to make improvements in education, it seems like generally, not characterizing the chairman's comments, but generally you hear, well, it's going to cost more and more money. And we certainly know investments need to be made, but sometimes adding more money more quickly is not necessarily the best way to implement the kind of reforms that we really need. And the frustration and concern that I have about Kerwin and a lot of folks that I know have, beyond just the cost, because I feel like we always get into this debate about cost versus kids. But what we've really got in our school systems, a lot of times the struggle for school systems to succeed and help our kids are not just money factors. They're also factors that go beyond funding. They go beyond that kind of thing of, well, we just need to push more money into the system. And so my encouragement and sort of, I guess, warning would be, if we're able to just make some adjustments in the length of time for these investments, it helps our counties catch up. And I would argue to the advocates that have strongly supported Kerwin, many of the groups, you know, some of them probably not my biggest fans, it's more I would ask if you would agree that it would be more sustainable since I'm asking a question. Isn't it so that it would be more sustainable to slow it down a little bit? It's not cutting away, it's slowing it down a little bit as far as the investment of money so we can be sure things are getting implemented and really having an impact on the bottom line of student achievement and success. And I guess that would be my question, isn't that so that we could do that without sacrificing the success of students?
Well, I know you know that we have an implementation board, an accountability board, and we consider that to be very serious and important, right? And as you point out, as we invest from year to year, we're in constant contact with them to make sure that those investments are paying off. And so that's I think, a critical component of the whole package. We've got to know that what we're doing is really making a difference in people's lives. And I know the committee is fully committed to that.
I really appreciate that. Just in closing, Mr. President, just in conclusion, I appreciate the answers. My view is that I appreciate the approach, for sure. As we talk about AIB, for example, I appreciate flexibility that's been, there's been some flexibility that they've shown in the past several months as we've dealt with issues in some of our jurisdictions. I was concerned about that at one point, and there's been some good conversation. I do have a little bit of concern with the way Kerwin was enacted. AIB is really, their accountability is the money getting spent properly, but it's not always about what the final results are. So that's something, that's a separate discussion from the state budget discussion. So I think that's something we ought to continue to look at too as a body. But I do appreciate the answers, and again, I think the approach on this budget has been, I don't probably agree with every decision that's been made, and we may talk about some of it, but I think the approach has been good to say we're not going to raise taxes this year when we clearly can handle what we need to handle this year without any sort of additional tax increases. So I thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the adoption of the amended report, Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just if I could go back to early in the, not specifically amendment, but part of the area where an amendment was that we were talking about the funds from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund.
Are you on page, Senator?
On this on this book, it is page 15. At the bottom of page 15.
The sources used in plan justice, and what comes from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good.
This is
Thank you.
Report language.
Yes, correct. For whatever it is. There's obviously been a lot of conversation about some of the priorities of the administration and what we were looking at with respect to the 2022 Climate Solutions Now program. One of it obviously was the extreme high cost of trying to implement some of that. So this report language transfers $90 million of the CEF fund balance to be able to go towards these climate solutions initiatives, right? Correct?
Correct. Okay. I don't think the report language does that, but it does it elsewhere. I'm happy to talk about it.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's within the BRFA that actually accomplishes that.
Okay, all right.
That transfer. And
let me
I may ask the subcommittee chair to jump in too in a minute, but go ahead.
Okay. Here's my question. We've seen, as we just spoke about earlier today, and we've seen another bill earlier today, that the CEF fund seems to be the area to go to when money is needed, and we can start transferring it to all these other different initiatives. I recall, we've talked about this for a number of years. Back in 2019, we actually put out a bill that required annual CEF reports to come back and talk about fund balance and also talk about a 3-year outlook at what projects were on the horizon and how the funding that was going to come in would be able to accomplish that. So I guess my question is, as we continue, one bill after another bill after another bill of pulling money out of CEF, is there a report, is there something out there that says, hey, here's the balance? You know, we are actually, and I'm not saying that you're not, but we are actually taking a look at what's in SEIF, what's coming in, and I think the last report I could find was 2022, and you know, the two major funders of SEIF are the ACP and RGGI, and obviously ACP's going up, RGGI's following as well. So there is a lot of money going into it. But my question really is, what is the evaluation of taking a look at the SEIF funding? There actually is a SEIF board that is supposed to be involved in some of this decision makings. I'm not saying they are or they're not, but I'm seeing that from what I saw, they're only meeting one time a year now. But you know, is the money actually there to continue to accomplish not just what you're doing in the budget, but also all of these bills that keep coming along and trying to say, well, we're just going to take 10 million here and another 6 million there, and just if you can provide
Sure.
some
I
insight to that.
I think it's a reasonable question, and I think that, well, on the surface you asked what's there, and after this action, there's still another $90 million there.
Okay.
So that is the balance as we move forward. You know, having that information, the policy decisions that are made along the way by the committees obviously affect what is intended by those committees, and we try to accommodate the committees, obviously, right? The policy, that's not our job. Our job is to make sure that the money is there. And in this case, it is. I don't know if do you have anything to add about the reporting requirements? There are.
Let's yield to the subcommittee chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the minority leader. So the reporting requirements you see on page 15 cover just the 90 million that we'll discuss in a minute being transferred as a result of the BRFA for the purposes the governor has laid out, which include multifamily and community EV charging, electric vehicle charging, electric school buses, building electrification, three buckets of priorities the governor has outlined to the General Assembly since announcing the 90 million transfer. After the transfer, there will remain 91.3 million in SEIF at the moment, but of course you know that it's variable, it moves up and down based on the two sources you mentioned.
Okay, and I appreciate that. So in a sense, there's 181 million, you've pulled out 90 million specifically for this.
Yes.
And then as other bills are being passed, there is a coordination of some type that says we've looked at, for instance, the bill that we spoke about this morning, and that's going to take out a certain amount of funding from SEIF that may specifically come from the solar ACP, whatever that is. We talked about a bill earlier this session too that, again, pulled money out of SEIF. Mm-hmm. There is an accounting of that's going on.
Absolutely. It's mostly through the Maryland Energy Administration, as you know,
right.
but we keep a careful eye on that in the PSTE subcommittee, of course.
Okay. All right.
And
thank you.
If I may, Mr. President.
Senator, may proceed.
Yeah, so I think you may be aware that any bill, regardless of the fund source, above $250,000, the committee gets a look at every time.
Yeah.
Every policy bill that comes in.
And I can understand that certainly from obviously the perspective of, is this a one-time use that we're going to do it one year, or are we setting up programs that are going to be relying on the funding from that designated source over multiple years? So.
And Senator, we are still awaiting the 2023 SEIF report, and I'm getting an answer from our analysts as to when we should all expect that.
I was looking for that as well.
If you hold on just one moment.
I've been texting with them as well too. I got a report that I was looking for, and that's what made me notice that the 2023 was not done yet. So I'm sure it will be done very quickly.
It's required to be submitted annually, but we don't have it yet. But I'm happy to call the Secretary of the MEA and gently urge that he send that report on over to the General Assembly.
That'd be much appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. On the adoption, thank you, Senator, on the adoption of the favorable report as amended. Any further discussion on the report? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the favorable report as amended is adopted. Believe there may be some amendments. Chair recognizes the minority whip. Senator has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, the senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had actually a little discussion earlier on the floor, and we've talked about this a lot in sort of internally and in our committees about community colleges. We talked about Kerwin a few minutes ago, and one of the most important players in how we're going to help improve career readiness among students is giving them access to community colleges at largely free of charge at earlier. So we're utilizing the community colleges. And I'm a proud community college graduate myself. We're utilizing the community colleges as a real engine for improving outcomes for students as they go into their post-secondary education. We're using community colleges to try to help bring down the cost of higher education, and I think those are wonderful and worthy goals. The governor's budget, as it came in, cut the community colleges back by roughly $22 million. I appreciate the work of the Budget and Tax Committee to restore about half of that funding, maybe a little more than half of that funding. I do know that there's a conversation about rebasing and changing the CADE formula. I have concerns about that, but that's not really the substance of my amendment today. I think for community colleges, being able to get back to the full CADE formula amount or roughly the same amount this year gives them an opportunity to have this year and then plan for what sounds like it may end up being a change in the formula percentage, and for a variety of reasons. And I think that's a different debate. But for this year, what I would like to do, and I've come up with an amendment that I think can do it, relatively without too much trouble, would be to take $10 million in general funds and put them back into the community colleges. The way we would offset that is Governor Moore has introduced legislation and has funded it in the budget this year called the Enough Act. And I actually have spoken to the governor about this, and I know it's a passionate thing that he's very supportive of and believes could be a real help in our communities. However, DLS has found that in the first year, it's a $15 million a year program. And I think the legislation hasn't been voted yet, but it will probably be soon. And no matter what anybody feels about those overall programs, I think the aim is very good to try to deal with poverty, especially persistent poverty in our communities. The DLS, however, has found that there's really not going to be a way that the $15 million can be expended this first coming year effectively. And they recommended a cut of about $10 million to just have it be funded at $5 million the first year, and then the next years would be $15 million. So I thought it would be great to maybe take that DLS recommendation and utilize that $10 million as a bridge, a stopgap this year coming up for our community colleges. So my amendment would simply transfer the $10 million to the community college fund and allow them to have this, basically have this year to then be preparing, fully funded, then be preparing for, if we do indeed change the formula, they at least have another year to prepare. So I consider it a friendly amendment. I would move the amendment, Mr. President, and ask for the body's support.
All right, the senator moves the amendment. Let's hear from the subcommittee chair.
Thank you very much. This CADE funding has been one of my priorities, I think, since I came here, and we've worked every year to make sure that they were funded properly. And over the past few years, we got them up to $397 million, which is a pretty sizable number. So this year, the governor took some of that money, and that went towards child poverty, which is a hard thing to fight against. But what we did do, we put the $10 million back into it, and that brings them through the BRFA $374 million. That will be their current number. No, I'm sorry. The BRFA had it at 374, and it will be up to 384. That'll be the number. Okay.
So my friendly amendment will get us the rest of the way there. Is that, or is this? Mr. President.
The child poverty got me. The rest can go to child poverty.
Okay, so Mr. President, I would like to press my amendment and ask for a roll call, and I do understand the discussion and the points that were made by the subcommittee chair, and she has definitely been a strong advocate for community colleges. I just want to again say, you know, we're in a situation where, and I'm not, governor's budget that came in cut Sellinger, cut community colleges. Now, I'm not necessarily saying we don't need to make cuts at times. You'll hear me argue for that. In fact, I think I just did a few minutes ago. I think the university system of Maryland did not take any cuts. And it's a much larger and bigger pot of money. And their enrollments were dropping as well during the pandemic, just like the community colleges. I'm not taking any money from the university system of Maryland with this. I'm literally taking money from a program that hasn't been created yet, that they do not have the ability to spend this year, according to DLS, fully, and just asking that we make the community colleges whole for one more year. So I'm just going to press my amendment, Mr. President, and ask for a roll call.
All right. Recognize the chair of the committee.
Yeah, so a couple things just to correct. There was about a $40 million cut to the university system. So it was done in a very different way, but nonetheless, it occurred. And to just piggyback on what the chair of the subcommittee said, just to be clear, the increase over the last 4 years went from about $250 million for the whole program to about $375 million. So if you think about that level of increase in 4 years, it's been pretty extraordinary. Now, I've been one of the ones pushing for it too, and I have been for actually decades since I first came into the legislature. I think it is a critical component to our overall educational system, and it is going to play a big role as we move forward and deal with the blueprint. One of the things that we are considering, and what the governor had done initially with both of those, in both of those, Sellinger and Cade, was to say, these are mandates, right? We always talk about mandates. And the question is, are they at the right levels? And based on the increases, and based on the fact that we are going to be looking at mandates, and as you know, throughout this session, we've been working very hard to not add any additional mandates. This is part of an overall strategy to get us to where we need to be. And I'll just give one technical point, too, about your amendment that didn't realize until I started reading. If the Enough Act doesn't pass, that money is not there, and therefore it would actually deplete from our fund balance, which I don't think we really want to do. So I would urge the body to reject this amendment.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion of senators who have not yet spoken? Chair recognizes the minority leader on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just in support of the amendment and commenting on the last part of what that is. Obviously, that's what's very difficult about this amendment process of trying to figure out things that some of us would like to prioritize versus all the hard work that the Budget Committee did, and we certainly understand that. But trying to find out how do we provide this additional funding. But I think what's interesting, my amendment might have been a little bit different because we just heard how there's such an opposition about funding non-public schools, but yet the Sellinger Fund funds exactly that. And the problem is if I recall, that's a formulaic breakdown for each of the schools based on how much University System of Maryland gets, right? So to be able to say that I just would like to take $10 million out of the $20 million we're giving Johns Hopkins and put it over to Cade might not be as simple to do. Although I think many of us that look at Johns Hopkins with a $9 billion endowment might not say they are in as much of a need as $10 million as our community college system is. So again, it's difficult to figure out the way to do that, but I think it's important that many of us, and I know, when I say from those of us from rural areas where community colleges are very important, we recognize there's community colleges everywhere. But again, if we're going to move forward with the blueprint, which again, many of us have serious doubts about whether or not that can be implemented at the local level or not, it does talk about how do we get students career ready. And career ready doesn't always mean going to schools that have $9 billion endowments. It means going to community colleges as well too. And Cecil College in my district has already said, based on what they see this budget to be, they're going to have to raise tuitions. And I don't think that's anything that we all want when we're talking about community colleges, is making it more expensive for students to go there. So again, I support my colleague's amendment, and again, don't know if that was the best way to do it, but I certainly agree with him that if there's a program that's not been funded yet, sure, why not go after that? But there's got to be money, and I know you guys did a hard job, and I know, Madam Chair, that you guys had worked on the best way to get these community colleges whole, but we didn't get there yet. And I think it's important that we recognize that we've got to do a little bit more maybe, and trying to make sure that we get these community colleges fully funded.
All right, on the amendment, to recognize the chair, or are we ready for the? It's hard to tell we're standing or not. That's So, all right. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Yeah,
oh yes. Oh,
very quickly. Yeah.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
You know, I appreciate your point, and regardless of how you would have come up with funding it, and literally that was just a few moments ago that I put all the pieces together on that. I stand by the overall concept, and that is we have had a dramatic, I think it actually ends up 9%, is that right? Annualized basis, at least. I mean, there aren't many places in the budget that have received that kind of annualized increase for any kinds of programs. We've fought for that, and it's not like we've wiped all that out. We haven't even come close to wiping all that out. Your point is well taken. It's important work, and we believe that the funding level that we've established is appropriate, and it's what we can do given the overall context of the budget. So I would again urge the body to reject this amendment.
All right, on the amendment, Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chair, I'll be brief. I first wanted to thank the chair for the effort of the Budget Committee to restore the dramatic cut to community colleges. I do rise in support of the amendment, mainly because of all the issues this session so far. The community college students actually came up in mass in all of our offices, and I really think that was helpful in your restoration of those funds, but obviously the challenges continue, and I thought it was an innovative way to pay for something that hasn't been funded yet. So that's why I'm supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 6 votes in the affirmative, 39 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. We have another amendment. Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District. Collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, the senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I did give the chair the courtesy to share my amendment beforehand. I'm rising and proposing an amendment that would prohibit state funds collected from all taxpayers, regardless of their personal views on the issue, to be used to fund abortion services, except in cases of rape and incest or to save the life of the mother. And I'll be brief. Budgets are about priorities, and the majority of my constituents, regardless of their personal view on abortion, they do not want taxpayer dollars used for abortion services, especially as access to abortion services have significantly increased as Maryland has expanded the number of healthcare providers who perform abortions to non-physicians, and with the push to enshrine abortion as a fundamental right in Maryland's Constitution. The concern is that Maryland is becoming an abortion destination for other states. And I hope my colleagues will at least agree that we'd rather have Maryland be a destination for tourism, Maryland's coast, the Baltimore Harbor, Maryland's historic State House, downtown streets like Frederick and Berlin, and of course, beautiful Western Maryland with Deep Creek Lake and the Appalachian Mountains. This amendment does not restrict a woman from having an abortion. It simply specifies that public funds are not used for abortions. Most of my constituents prefer that public funds be used for priorities like we just talked about, restoring the cuts to community colleges. So after meeting with those college students, as I mentioned, I can attest that that's where their priorities are for supporting community college funding as opposed to abortion services. And I move the amendment, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senators move the amendment. Recognizing the subcommittee chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask my colleagues to reject this amendment. This debate has been hashed in previous years and is currently in statute chapter 56 at this moment. One of the things that we should just respect and also recognize is that when that debate did take place, that we were taking in consideration, Mr. President, physical health, but we were also taking in consideration mental health. And this amendment right here will be rejecting what we actually done in the past around physical and mental health. So I would ask colleagues to reject this respective amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Chair recognizes the Senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I vote for this budget. I support this budget. I do every year support this budget, but my amendments that I've had at times was this amendment. And I agree with tax-paying people of using those tax money for abortion. I believe in adoption. Adoption is a big thing that we've talked about at one time, and adopting is very important. And limiting abortions and having an individual having the opportunity to have a child, have a baby, and if they don't want that child, they have an opportunity to have an adoption to somebody that'd love to have a baby, because maybe they don't have that opportunity. And I think we've limited that because we continue as Marylanders abort. So I think this is one thing that I have fought for years, and as I respect every person here and what they believe in, but I believe that adoption is something that we should be, abortion that is, is something we should be doing. And again, I respect our budget and I work hard with our chair and our sub-chairs, but this is one thing that I fight for. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 34 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Additional amendments to the bill or its title. Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore County.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have an amendment.
Senator has an amendment.
Amendment 593121/1.
We will collect and distribute the amendment.
In the interest of time, I'll get started, if that's okay.
Let's just make sure it's in the system. Once it's on the board. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you very much. Already in the budget right now is an amendment to fund a correctional ombudsman. And that is a piece of legislation that is pending before the Judicial Proceedings Committee right now. And this amendment would slightly alter how that is funded. And so that is all this does, is it corrects and updates the amendment that's already currently in the budget, just clarifies it and corrects it. So I ask for adoption of the amendment.
All right, senators move the amendment. Let's hear from the chair of the committee.
It's friendly amendment.
All right, friendly amendment. Any objections to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Additional amendments to the bill or its title. Seeing none, Senate Bill 360 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. The clerk will read The next bill,
Senate Bill 362, the President Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2024. Question is on the adoption of the 35 committee amendments and the favorable report.
all right. On to the BRFA. We will recognize the chair of the committee on the committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will introduce the amendments. I will introduce the amendments to Senate Bill 362 in groups. After describing each amendment, I'll move for each group to be adopted. I ask that members hold any additional amendments until the committee amendments have been considered. I'd like to note that the amendments to the BRFA implement the committee's actions on the budget. With your permission, Mr. President, I will begin.
The chairman may proceed.
Amendment 1 makes technical changes. Are we doing this? 1 second, please. Amendment 1 makes technical changes to the purpose and function paragraphs. Amendment 2 modifies a provision to eliminate a mandate and authorize the use of special funds to have it applied to fiscal 25 only. Amendment 3 strikes a provision that would have altered allowable uses of the funds provided for the coordinated community supports. Amendment 4 modifies a provision to require a 60-day notice before an enrollment freeze can be implemented in the Child Care Scholarship Program. Amendment 5, 7, and 8 specify how state aid per full-time equivalent students for the public 4-year institutions is to be calculated for various higher education formulas. Amendment 6 modifies a provision that alters the CADE funding formula to increase the percentage of state aid per full-time equivalent student for the public 4 years used in the calculation. Amendment 9 modifies a provision that alters the Selinger formula to increase the percentage of state aid for full-time equivalent students for the public 4 years used in the calculation. Move the adoption of amendments 1 through 9.
All right, the chairman moves for the adoption of amendments 1 through 9 on the BRFA. Are there any discussion on the amendments or desires to separate? If not, any objections? Without objection, amendments 1 through 9 are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
This is amendments 10 through 16. Amendment 10 strikes a provision that would have capped spending on certain services by the Development Disabilities Administration. Amendment 11 adds a provision to expand the allowable uses of Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program Fund. Amendment 12 clarifies the intent of a provision. Amendment 13 strikes a provision that would have reduced the mandate for grants for warrant apprehension efforts. Amendment 14 modifies a provision to eliminate the set-aside of certain revenue in fiscal 24 and 25 only. Amendment 15 strikes a provision that would have eliminated printed budget books. Amendment 16 strikes a provision that eliminated required appropriations for fiscal 2025 only because the reductions were made in the budget bill. Move amendments 10 through 16.
All right, the chairman has moved for the adoption of amendments 10 through 16. Any discussion or desires to separate? Any objections? Without objection, amendments 10 through 16 are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
These are amendments 17 through 22. Amendment 17 modifies a provision to alter the commission licensed lottery agents receive from sales. Amendment 18 reduces the required supplemental contribution to the pension system and eliminates provisions requiring deductions in the calculation of pension calculations. Amendment 19 adds a provision to specify a certain distribution is to be used to repair prior transferred funds. Amendment 20 strikes a provision that would have altered funding for 1 year only. Amendment 21 strikes a provision that would have eliminated a requirement to provide vehicle registration stickers. Amendment 22 requires a provision that would have eliminated the mandate for the Maryland Public Broadcasting Corporation. Move adoption of the amendments 17 through 22.
Chairman has moved for the adoption of amendments 17 through 22. Any discussion or desires to discuss separately? Chair recognizes the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Maybe just a quick question on Amendment 17, dealing with the commissions for lottery agents.
Yes.
Just explain the history of what happened there, please.
So, as you might remember, I think it was 2 years ago, might have been last year, I think it was 2 years ago, we actually raised the commission on lottery agents from 5.5% to 6%. The governor's budget brought it back down, and we are essentially going to the middle ground on that.
Okay, and in doing that, do we know, what impact that makes to the budget from a revenue perspective?
What's the number on that?
1.7 million and then 20.7 million?
In the
1.7 million in the current year,
Oh.
20.7?
Okay. So for current year, it's going to be about 1.7 million, and for the next budget year, about 20 million.
$20 million. Just the difference in going, because essentially what it's done is it's dropped it down from 6% to 5.75%.
That's correct.
It's $20 million.
The bulk of it is the caching?
The caching.
Yeah, caching is
We're just the part that does. Do we have the part
yeah,
that?
just it's 6 million?
My apologies. Just that portion is $6 million.
Just that portion, okay. All right, so if I were to look, I understand your responsibility to pass the budget, so all of ours, but at the same time, I would also see that that's $6 million that is not going back to the convenience stores and the agents that are selling it. In a sense, they're taking that hit, right?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendments, any further discussion? Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the 44th District.
Thank you, and I apologize, but I was hoping to get some clarification on Amendment 11. I think you had mentioned the Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program Fund.
11?
Right. And I'm wondering, is that in any way connected with,
No.
It's not, all right. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, on amendments 17 through 22, any further discussion? Any objections? Without objection, amendments 17 through 22 are adopted. Chairman may proceed.
Okay, now 23 through 35. Amendment 23 increases the transfer from the state's self-insured unemployment reserve account to the general fund. Amendments 24 and 25 strike provisions that would have required certain transfers to the general fund. Amendment 26 reduces amounts that would have transferred to the Behavioral Health Administration. Amendment 27 removes a transfer from the dedicated purpose account to the general fund. Amendment 28 specifies the components of the transfer from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund to the dedicated purpose account. Amendment 29 through 31 authorize transfers from the dedicated purpose account to the general fund. Amendment 32 authorizes the transfer of unspent funds to be used to support personnel costs within the Department of Natural Resources. Amendment 33 reduces prior year funding available for certain capital project. Amendment 34 alters the allowable uses of the fiscal 2024 grant. Amendment 35 authorizes the transfer of funds to the general fund. Move adoption of amendments 23 through 35.
All right, the chairman moves for the adoption of amendments 23 through 35. Any discussion or desires to take up separately? Without objection, any objections? Without objection, the amendments are adopted. That does it? Is that 35?
That is.
All right,
correct.
with the amendments having been adopted, question now is on the adoption of the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion of the report? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the favorable report as amended is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th District has an amendment.
Yes, Mr. President.
Pages will please collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment deals solely with the Highway User Revenue Fund. In the BRFA that we're discussing now, FY26 is a $100 million cut, and FY27 is also a $100 million cut, and this amendment will restore that. The Highway User Revenue Fund is critical to the operation of our county and municipal governments. Current law is to fund it fully, and the current law should be allowed to stand. The senator from Baltimore City introduced legislation that passed unanimously 2 years ago. A good colleague from District 45, and the cross-file also passed unanimously. So this was a unanimous vote in 2022 in the State Senate and the House of Delegates. Senate Bill 726 for reference. And this will allow that legislation to be fulfilled. The governor was correct to restore funding for this year, and we have a responsibility to ensure our local counterparts remain solvent and supported by protecting this fund from any future cuts. This amendment would simply allow the funding structure currently in Maryland law that I referenced a moment ago to stand, and I would ask the body to join me in protecting these critical funds that are so important to our counties and municipal governments. And with that, I'd like to move the amendment, Mr. President, and kindly request a roll call vote, please.
All right, the senator has moved the amendment. Let's hear from the chair of the committee on the amendment.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the amendment ahead of time also. You are correct. In 2022, we did change the law and put forth a pretty substantial bump in the highway revenue funds. And at that time, we believed that we could afford it and move forward. One of the things that we didn't know, that we only really became aware of this year, is how significant a problem there was with the Transportation Trust Fund. And recognizing that, the Department of Legislative Services actually suggested to us some amendments that would have really dramatically cut it down to a flat rate of around $200 million. The committee, of course, considers that, because we consider everything that the Department of Legislative Services comes up with and thinks about it in that context. The first thing that we do know is that the governor, as you pointed out, in the next year, in 2025, keeps it at the level that that was put in the bill. Had we taken the cut for that, it would have been a $200 million cut at the recommendation of the Department of Legislative Services. We did not do that. We kept that at the level that was in the bill and what the administration also was recommending. This is really about the impact in 2 years, 26 and 27. And I would say that as we had our discussions about the blueprint, we also are having very careful discussions about the transportation budget and what it's going to look like in the years to come and what we're going to need to do to get it in the place that we'd like it to be. And so I'm going to ask that we reject this amendment, knowing that we are for 25 in a good place, the same place that everybody was in before we started this, and know that every year we're going to consider this important program, and it is a very important program. We know the impact that it has in many jurisdictions, you know, we're always looking for opportunities to help out where we can. But for now, I'm going to ask that we reject this because we're, again, in a good year coming forward, and I think if we stick with the committee, we're going to keep doing that sort of conversation as we move forward.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion on the amendment? Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just in support of the amendment, and appreciate the chairman's comments that obviously FY25, this doesn't hurt anyone. At the same time, we've talked a lot about the blueprint. and we recognize the same type of thing, that we are going to have problems in the out years with the blueprint, being able to fund it from the state level and the local level, but we're not necessarily addressing that this year either. And so, to be able to say that for one of these very important items, and I'm just going to lump highway user into the Transportation Trust Fund, for two of those big drivers of our budget, one we're looking out and saying, hey, we need to do something. One we're not looking out and saying we need to do something, or at least not coming out in this budget with respect to the blueprint. How are we going to fix this in the upcoming years? I will add that I think this amendment makes sense because we also have the Train Commission that we are both members of, and we have been tasked by the General Assembly to figure out how we're going to look at revenue for the Transportation Trust Fund. And this wasn't necessarily a recommendation of the Train Fund or the Train Commission in what we were going to do. So, to be able to say that, hey, we think it's that important that we go the out years and make these types of cuts, because essentially this is what's affecting the counties. Obviously it is a Transportation Trust Fund, but it's putting more pressure on the counties to be able to meet their highway, especially maintenance requirements in the upcoming years. So, again, I think we should be a little bit consistent in how we're going to address these out years. There's lots of problems, and Mr. President, I appreciate your stance on some of the things that the House is talking about doing and trying to really focus on this year. This one, I think, takes it a little bit too far, and I think that this amendment wouldn't hurt anything with this budget, but it sends a message back to the counties. We don't necessarily need to do this yet. We're going to take some time, maybe take a look at what the Train Commission decides to do and make some recommendations based on that. So I would just support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
If you like.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 33 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Further amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes the minority leader has an amendment. All right, pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Once again, I'm just trying to point out, I think, some of the inconsistencies of what we do sometimes. There was an amendment in the BRF, and again, the BRF is interesting because BRF dictates policy. It creates a lot of policy. It's not just the budget, but we are sneaking a lot of things in here that is creating policy, and in some cases, like I believe this one, has not required an agency come in for a bill hearing. And the issue I'm talking about is that the MTA, Maryland Transit Authority, essentially came in and said, we can't afford electric vehicles, electric buses, as the state mandated us to do in 2021. So therefore, can you take us out of the mandate of having to purchase these electric buses? And in fact, even said something along the lines, if we can't find electric buses, we'll go to clean diesel buses. So at the same time, we've got a parallel path going that just in end of last year, the governor decided to unilaterally adopt the Advanced Clean Cars 2 initiative, which is essentially just getting on the backs of whatever California does. Maryland's going to do it as well too. But what it really does is it requires that beginning in model year 2027, all dealerships will have to have shipped to them at least 43% of the vehicles need to be electric vehicles. 43%. And it increases each year until 2035, when it gets to 100% of the vehicles shipped to manufacturers need to be electric vehicles. So this is Maryland, the General Assembly's way of essentially putting a mandate on Marylanders saying, you will buy electric vehicles, period, by 2035. Now, of course, you can go out of state and buy them and bring them back in, which will essentially happen because our surrounding states are not adopting ACC2. Some are considering it. Very interesting, Mr. President, I don't know if you saw just last week, Connecticut decided to back out of ACC2. They said, no, we're not going to go forward with this anyways because obviously infrastructure is not in place. Customers are not comfortable with the EVs. There's a lot of range anxiety. They cost a lot. They cost a lot to maintain. They cost probably all the things I'm saying is exactly what MTA said to you guys when saying, guess what? We can't afford electric buses, zero emission buses. In 2021, in Senate Bill 137, we passed legislation prohibiting MTA from purchasing buses that are not zero emission buses. The bill defined alternative fuel bus not powered by gas or diesel. It further defined zero emission buses as powered entirely by electric. This was our legislation that we passed in 2021 mandating what MTA had to do with respect to purchasing their new fleet of buses. Well, now they've come in and through the BRFA, again, not through a bill hearing, not coming up and having to explain it, but just kind of sneaking this in and saying that they can't afford these buses, they can't find enough of them, and so they're going to reduce the amount of buses that they can purchase that are zero emission buses. And we decided through the BRFA, not through a bill hearing, but through the BRFA, to allow them to do that. So I've got a very simple amendment that would just allow the citizens of Maryland to be in the same position as MTA is and say, you know what? The restrictions that you're putting on us and our dealerships, we can't figure that out either. We're not going to be able to. And Mr. Chairman, the members of EEE committee had heard my bill hearing because I went through the process of putting a bill in to say, hey, can we delay the implementation of the ACC2 for 3 years? It hasn't gotten a vote yet. It might still, but I doubt it. But it hasn't gotten a vote yet. But I think, again, what we're trying to do is sometimes point out the hypocrisy of what goes on. And so this bill, this amendment would essentially just do the same thing as what I had asked, and mandate, go back to the legislation that we put in place, mandate at MTA for the next 2 fiscal years, at least 25% of their buses must be zero emission. That's what we wanted. That's the bill that we passed a couple years ago. We're not letting them out of it because they found BRFA language. And we're then saying the same time that, that as they go forward, that the goals of what they should be doing each year, MTA doing each year, should match what the citizens of Maryland have to do each year in buying electric vehicles as well too. So it brings everybody together, everybody on par with this, doesn't allow one group to be able to come in and change, our legislation, the legislation that we passed in 2021, doesn't allow them to just change that through BRFA language. Says, nope, we're going to hold you to it, and at the same time, we're going to actually put some goals in there, the same goals that the people of Maryland are going to have to abide by because the Department of Environment adopted the California's Advanced Clean Cars Act. So with that, Mr. President, I would ask for favorable support on the amendment.
All right, the senator moves the amendment. Let's hear from the chair of the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the minority leader for providing this amendment in advance. And I appreciate the spirit of the amendment. At the same time, I think we're comparing a bit of apples and oranges. So smaller vehicles are different than the MTA buses that we are speaking to and the amendment speaks to. There's a couple of reasons why MTA came to us with this BRFA change. Some of them are supply chain issues, as you mentioned before. An important difference, though, being in the middle of the Atlantic states, we're seeing some challenges with bus range, particularly in colder weather months. And so that was also a contributing factor to this change in the BRFA. And again, the differences between a large bus and an individual smaller vehicle. So I appreciate the spirit in which the amendment was provided, but it's a bit of an apples and oranges situation, and I urge the body to reject the amendment.
All right, let's hear from the Minority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm rising in support of the Minority Leader's amendment because I think it's time to end a charade that we're doing here. I was told it is a climate crisis. I was told that we've got to do all this electrification, we've got to adopt California clean cars because we've only got, we've only got about a decade. It's a crisis. We're gonna do a mandate, and everybody's under the mandate, from Aunt Susie to your local construction company to the powerful state government and all the buses they're going to buy. By the way, buses generally are among the dirtiest of vehicles, just because they're large vehicles. So electrification, if you're going to do that, doing it on the buses makes the most sense. So now we have language in the BRFA, and look, I don't blame the department because as the floor leader correctly pointed out, there's an issue in cold weather. You don't say with buses. Well, there's also an issue in cold weather with large electric trucks and fire trucks. But this amendment only protects the state government that mandated all this to begin with. Does nothing. This amendment in the BRFA, not in the BRFA, not my colleague's amendment, which is an excellent amendment that says if the state's going to give itself an opt-out in the face of this giant climate existential crisis, that maybe we ought to let Joe and Susie, taxpayer, small business owner, have the same sort of opt-out. I think that's eminently fair. A climate crisis where you can still get a loan to build a giant house right on the water near the Chesapeake Bay or in Florida. So the insurance companies and the banks, people are still giving loans, so I'm not sure how much of a crisis. They don't seem to believe it's a crisis. Former president of the United States buys a beautiful home on Martha's Vineyard, which I'm told by some of our other folks who say this is a crisis it's going to be gone in a few years. But it's a crisis, and so we've got to electrify everything, and we've got to get electric buses that are extremely expensive. But wait, not so fast. We found out it's really hard to get these electric buses because there's supply chain issues, and we found out in cold weather it doesn't work so well. I have no problem with the state backing that out in the BRFA here, but we ought to give the same sort of flexibility to our citizens, our taxpayers, and our small businesses who, yes, there is a difference between large buses and a small four-door car, but there's a lot of businesses in our state that have to buy large vehicles to do work, and they're still under this mandate. So this is an excellent amendment, Mr. President. I'd move the amendment and ask for a roll call vote.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion? Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County on the amendment.
If I may, thank you very much, Mr. President. I just heard the Minority Whip stating that he has been told there's a climate crisis. Told there's a climate crisis. Told there is a climate crisis. Colleagues, I don't need to be told that there's a climate crisis. I have eyes, I have ears. I am witnessing the climate crisis. I am witnessing wildfires that destroy thousands and thousands of acres because of extreme heat that we've never experienced before on our globe. I am witnessing the melting of glaciers in our North Pole because of extreme heat that we have never witnessed on this globe before. I am witnessing flooding that we have never had before, storms and hurricanes that we have never had before. Now, I heard the criticism that, well, maybe we're moving too fast, and sometimes, look, we have to backtrack because we were moving too fast. Colleagues, we are moving fast because of the urgency of the climate disaster that is befalling us, because for too many years, the climate deniers refused to take action. That's why we are now in a crisis, and we have to move quickly. Not everything we do will prove to be perfection, and we will have to be adaptable as we determine and conclude whether something is performing exactly as we hoped. But we have to act quickly. We are doing the very best that we can to now address what the climate deniers didn't give us the opportunity to do in the past. So yes, Mr. President, we are moving quickly, and we will, from time to time, have to make adjustments. Colleagues, I'll be putting up a red vote on this amendment because I am witnessing the climate crisis. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, any further discussion? Any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to my colleague for making many points of my amendment that we do need to, at least if we're going to pass legislation here, hold the administration and the departments accountable for that. We discussed all of that. Probably the same comments that my colleague just brought up were mentioned in the bill hearing in 2021 on why this was necessary to move forward. But again, maybe against some of our votes, the General Assembly determined that we were going to require that MTA purchase all zero-emission vehicles going forward, period. Now, maybe my colleague is right in saying, you know what, hey, we get to certain points and maybe it doesn't work out the way that all of us thought it was going to work out. Maybe supply chain isn't there anymore. Maybe infrastructure isn't in place anymore. Maybe people still have range anxiety when it comes to electric vehicles. Maybe people don't like being stopped, on the side of the road when it's cold out, not being able to get a jump like you would, or a little 5-gallon of gas put in the car, but actually sit there for hours on end waiting for their car to get charged up. Maybe people just aren't ready to do that yet. So I've got a bill in that would address that. But this amendment just simply says MTA needs to abide by what we tell them to do. And we thought that it was important enough in 2021 to say that they can only buy zero-emission vehicles. They've come up with a reason on why they can't. So if we're not going to pass that amendment, I would just agree with my colleague. We have to look down the road as we go through all sorts of these types of mandates on people to be able to say, down the road, we might need to be flexible. We might need to be able to take a look at what the supply chain looks like. We might be able to take a look at the amount of EVs that are coming out of manufacturing facilities across the country. I think that everybody does know that the Ford F-150 Lightning was being manufactured up in Detroit. They cut production of that. Not enough people wanted to buy it, so they actually cut production of that, moved all their workers into places that are building pickup trucks and SUVs, because obviously that's what people want. So they've cut that, but that's a great reason down the road why I put my bill in. It says maybe we ought to wait this out for 3 years. See if manufacturing can keep up with it. But again, I think it's important that if we're going to be flexible with certain things, maybe we need to find ways to be flexible with other policies as well too. So I still press the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 34 votes in the negative, the Senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 362 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Appreciate the chair and the members of the committee and the body for getting through, especially the senator from District 7, apparently. No, in all seriousness, no, thank you to the chair for and members working through the budget. We still have third reader to go, but appreciate the hard work that's been done. So, all right, let's go ahead and switch over to, or back to Education, Energy, and the Environment. We are at report number 26. The clerk will read the first bill. And actually, before we start, Madam Clerk, we're going to try and we're going to try and push through. So we're going to do second readers for a while here. We'll see how far we can get. We're just going to try and go as much as we can and see what time it is. I would imagine bill hearings, we probably are going to have to push back for committees that have bill hearings. So, we'll probably at least here till 2, I would imagine. So let's take it from there. We'll see where we go. Madam Clerk, if we could read the first bill.
Senate Bill 99, Senator Kagan, election law affiliating with a party and voting unaffiliated voters, favorable.
Recognizing Vice Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are a lot of trends happening in our election systems. One of them we've talked about on the floor, which is the increased number of people who are voting by mail or voting through an internet-delivered ballot. Another one is the huge increase in the number of people who are registering to vote, but doing it as an unaffiliated voter. That number has risen in recent years from 8% to currently 21.4%. And I suspect that our wonderful pages can identify with that because young people are a part of it. Whether it's a pox on both your houses, whether it's I'm not sure, whether it's I like some things about the Democrats and some things about the Republicans, but they are choosing not to affiliate. Maryland has closed primaries, and that means they cannot have a voice, do not have a voice when it comes to selecting our next president, our next governor, etc., and us. This bill simply allows people who are unaffiliated to register, affiliate, and vote a primary ballot during early voting. So rather than needing to figure out and get their paperwork in more than 3 weeks in advance, it moves it up so that they have up until 5 days before Election Day. So it gives them a little bit more time as people are starting to pay attention to the ballot, to the election, and that's all it does. They would come in, they would choose to affiliate, they would cast a provisional partisan ballot, and if it's found that they are indeed a resident of that county, and if indeed they have been an unaffiliated voter, they would be allowed to have their vote counted. And colleagues, once they affiliate, they stay affiliated unless they affirmatively choose to go back and re-register as unaffiliated or with another party. With 21.4 and growing percentage of our constituents not able to have a voice in our increasingly polarized districts, we're going to have a crisis in not having candidates and not having voters engage. I will just mention that in 46 of 47 of our races in this body, 46 of us were elected with more than 55% of the vote. So one district was close in November. What that means is in 46 districts, the decisions are really made in the primary. And we're leaving 21% and growing of our constituents out of the conversation. We are not expecting that we're going to have almost 900,000 Marylanders, unaffiliated Marylanders, rush to the poll during early voting to affiliate. But some people will, because they're inspired by us or by a candidate for governor or president, and they say, I have an opinion about this, and I want to cast a ballot. So with that, Mr. President, I'd like to move the favorable committee report. Thank you.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I got a question or two, if I could ask the floor leader.
Floor leader yield.
Did you say you can register up to 5 days before Election Day?
If this bill passes.
5 days. But
that would be just for if you're unaffiliated.
But early voting starts more than 5 days before Election Day.
Correct. So early voting starts, and I'm looking frantically for my piece of paper. Early voting starts 18 days before Election Day and ends 5 days before. So I feel like I'm not giving you that correctly. Hold on, let me just find the piece of paper. Hold on. The bottom line is that if someone is unregistered, they can show up on Election Day. If they're unaffiliated, they don't have this right. So this is working towards providing a little bit of equity.
Okay, I think I'm getting it now. So if you're not registered to vote, in other words, you're a decline. In other states, you're called independent. We don't have independent here in Maryland, so you'd be called a decline. If you're a decline voter, you can show up on Election Day and register to vote on Election Day and vote. That's the current law?
That would be not correct. If you are unaffiliated right now, you have to fill out the paperwork and get it in more than 3 weeks before Election Day. If you show up on Election Day or during early voting, an unaffiliated voter is given a ballot for school board. That's it. No voice for governor, no voice for president, no voice for Congress. This would move the needle just a little bit in case they'd like to be engaged in a party primary, a Republican or Democratic primary. Then once they affiliate, they stay with that party. So it would help the Republican Party to grow. It would help the Democratic Party to grow and be more inclusive.
Okay, I've got that. But the deadline here is 5 days before Election Day. So if this bill passes and I'm unaffiliated or declined, I can show up at an early vote location and can affiliate with the party during early voting and vote. But I cannot go to the polls on Election Day and affiliate on Election Day and vote.
That is correct. This was a compromise that was a while in the making, and frankly, that makes it a little easier on Election Day for our poll workers, so they have not any more provisional voters than they already do.
It just sounds confusing. Somehow you're going to have to explain to declined voters that if you want to vote, you have to vote early. You can't wait till Election Day to vote because you won't be able to vote if you wait till Election Day.
It's a fair point. My preference is that there should be total equality, and that whether you are unaffiliated or just moved here from Wyoming, you should be able to affiliate and vote in the primaries. That would have been my preference, but sometimes we don't always get our way, and so this is moving the needle just a little bit forward and letting them be involved in the process. What's happening now is people are coming in to vote during the primary. They are saying, I really want to vote, and the judges are saying, I'm really sorry, you can't because you're unaffiliated. I can give you a ballot for school board. And they are frustrated, and so they insist on casting a partisan ballot even after having been told that their ballot will be rejected because they are unaffiliated. Our number of provisional ballots increased by 50% between 2012 and 2016. People want to vote. They're inspired by candidates, and they want to engage, and they can't. So this would allow some more people to choose to get involved and cast a partisan ballot.
I think I now understand the vote. I do think it will be confusing in practice to try to inform declined voters that if you want to vote, you better get there during early voting, because if you wait till Election Day, you're not going to be permitted to vote. That sounds confusing. It seems to me it would have been better either to have all or none than to have this halfway proposal that's in this bill. But thanks very much.
Thank you, Senator. All right, let's hear the Minority Whip has a question.
Yes, if the floor leader is willing to yield.
Senator may proceed.
Can I ask about kind of what with this bill? I know you're right. A lot of folks are registering independent. In the past, I've actually wanted to try to do something about circuit court judge races, because it is, people don't get to vote for their judge because if they win both primaries, they move ahead. Now, that's not this bill, and that it's complicated. Did the committee get input or get any testimony from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party of the state?
In past years, this is not the first year that I've brought this bill. In past years, I have reached out to both party leaders. In the past, I have had a Democratic Party chair sit next to me and testify for it. We did not get any opposition from either party.
Okay, good to know. So as I was reading the bill, and you explained it, but I'm just trying to be sure I understand. So right now, current law is you have until 3 weeks before primary election day, not early voting, primary election literally the day. So May 14th this year, you'd have 30 days before May 14th to change to be a Republican or a Democrat so that you could participate in a primary, correct?
Correct.
This is changing it to, you have up until the 5th day before, but can you only do the change at a polling place?
Yes.
You can't
As
go.
opposed to.
Well, I could go to the post office and get a form, or I can go online and fill a form and submit it.
I
Change
think
my
we're
affiliation.
envisioning it only being during early voting because it has to be with a judge. It has to be a provisional ballot. So no, you would have to come and show up and attest to the fact that you are a county resident, and then that you would be allowed to affiliate and
So-
cast a partisan provisional ballot.
I understand that part about showing up, doing it, checking with the judge, but right now, the way most people would change their party affiliation was they would go online and get a form.
They
What if-
could,
but
or
if-
go to their.
So if we change this law and somebody does that 15 days out, that wouldn't process, so they could do that and show up and say, I want to vote, because I changed my registration, but they would be told at the polling place, no, we don't have a record of that.
They would be given a provisional ballot in the same way. And the
Okay,
records would
so that's
be
the way the process
verified,
works.
and if they had changed their party affiliation in some other manner, that vote should
Because
be
they could
counted.
change it there, so they could change
Of
it
course,
there.
it's
Okay,
just
all right.
easier if you're going to show up.
Okay. The challenge I have with this is we're making a policy decision. Generally, parties have dictated who can participate in their primaries. And your argument about independence, it makes, I understand that argument. I'm not sure I agree that, I think you should probably make a selection of what party you're in. So, but what you're going to open up is you're opening up primaries. So I think people in the chamber, just to be sure people know, if you'd like more independents to show up in your Democratic primary in Montgomery County or Prince George's County, you should vote for the bill. If you think that you think people should join a party to vote, you're going to maybe oppose the bill, correct? Or is there some middle ground here?
I think you said it well. I was just reading a Gallup poll report that says that people who identify as independents are larger than either Democrats or Republicans. The demographics are changing, folks.
I agree with that.
I think we ought to open the door and let them come in. and
Mr.
let them vote.
Mr. President, another question. So if I'm a registered Republican, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody in the room.
We're shocked by that.
If for some reason, and boy, to the folks listening back home, this isn't going to happen, but if for some reason I decided, or let's say a friend of mine that's a registered Republican decided they wanted to vote in the Democratic primary in Carroll County, can they do this too if we pass this bill in early voting?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
So I'm a registered Republican.
Yes.
I decide I want to vote in the Democratic primary for the most conservative
thank you.
Democrat.
That's a really important question. No, Maryland would remain a closed primary state. There is no Republican to Democrat. There is no Democrat to Republican. This only affects unaffiliated voters, colleagues. So
But-
you can move from unaffiliated to Republican or unaffiliated to Democrat. That's it.
So to me, Mr. President, to me that's not really fair. If we're gonna, it's not closed because you can be an independent and vote in your primary. A closed primary means only people registered with that party can vote.
That's correct, and that's what we're allowing them to do, is choose to be in that party.
But
so
only-
now you're going to affiliate on my team, so now you get to vote for the leaders of my team,
But
or your
but,
team.
But Mr. President, only if they are independent. What if they're a Republican or if they're a Democrat? As I always often encourage our colleagues to switch parties. If they want to, but seriously, if they want to switch parties, we're saying the independent can do it. So we're letting the independent be the ultimate free agent, but we're not allowing someone from another party to switch if they want to.
Okay, so Senator, let me correct something. First off, we are not talking about independent. There used to be an independent party. It no longer exists. So we are talking about people who are not affiliated with any party, not the Greens, not the left, not the Liberal, not the Conservative, not any other party. They are not affiliated with Democrats or Republicans. If you are unaffiliated, or you're any party, no, let me make this. If you're a Democrat and would prefer to be a Republican, or a Republican who prefers to be a Democrat, you can do that today. It just has to be done in advance. 3 weeks in advance, you can change parties. This bill, which would allow for party changing during early voting before a primary election, is only for unaffiliated. But others can still change parties, absolutely. Current laws apply.
So, Mr. President, the unaffiliated, so the term independent was used a lot, so I was using it. It is true they're technically considered unaffiliated. We're making the unaffiliated voter the super free agent, but the Green Party member or the Libertarian Party member or the Republican or the Democrat, they are not able to take advantage of this because they've decided that they'd like to participate in one party's primary or the other. Correct.
They are fractional, but that is true because they are already affiliated. This bill, Senator, only applies to unaffiliated voters, not those affiliated with any party of any size or any variety.
Okay. Mr. President, I think I would like to, there's not an amendment on this. I think I'd like to ask for a special order till the appropriate time tomorrow for the purposes of possible amendments.
Would you like this afternoon or tomorrow morning?
I don't know that we'll have this afternoon.
Oh, okay,
It's looking.
great.
If I could make I'll be happy to make the order till the next session, whichever that, or is that a problematic?
Probably tomorrow morning is
Tomorrow
going to be
morning
next.
is fine.
Okay.
Any objections?
Nope, that's fine.
Without
Thank you.
objection, so ordered. And a good clarification, we're looking, we'll probably pause somewhere near 2 today and let committees try and do some work this afternoon, avoid especially the second session today, and do doubles Thursday, Friday. That way committees have a little bit more time, and then we can focus on the floor. So we'll see where we get. All right, the bill will be special order to the appropriate time tomorrow. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 451, Senator Brooks, Baltimore County Board of Education, non-student member compensation and student member scholarships, alterations, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill increases the compensation for members of the Baltimore County Board of Education. Compensation for each non-student member, other than the chair of the board, increases by $9,000 to a total of $16,500 annually. Compensation for the board chair increases by $10,000 to a total of $17,500 annually. The student member scholarship is also increased by $2,500, such that the student who completes a full term of the county board receives a scholarship of $10,000. Compensation increases does not apply to compensation of board members serving in term beginning before the effective date of the bill, and only takes effect upon the next office. In the event that an individual is appointed or elected to fill an unexpired term after the effective date of the bill. There's one committee amendment. The amendment delays the effective date of the bill to July 1, 2026 from July 1, 2024. There's no fiscal impact. I move the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 451 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's see, clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 458, Senator Kagan, campaign finance, political organizations, prohibitions, and disclosures, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, there is a new development in fraud, and it's ripping off our constituents and especially our seniors. They're called scam PACs. They are set up for the purpose of raising money for, allegedly, for good causes, but they don't. The money tends to be used for self-dealing or self-enrichment. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples. In Catonsville, there was a scammer who raised over $1 million that promised people a non-existent chance to dine with Donald Trump. In Annapolis, there was a scammer who raised more than $20 million on behalf of Ken Cuccinelli. None of the money, not a dime, went to the candidate. And finally, in Montgomery County, in 2020, the scammers created a PAC to support, allegedly, local volunteer firefighters. They raised $4.6 million, not a dime went to firefighters or our first responders. Both the FBI and the Federal Election Commission have warned us about these PACs. scam packs. And this bill, Mr. President, colleagues, simply requires more disclosure and allows the State Board of Elections to have more authority to issue subpoenas and to shut these folks down. There are two committee amendments. The first is technical, and the second tweaks the bill a little bit. Prohibiting the making of fraudulent claims, requires disclosure, removes raffles, and makes sure that, and makes it a little less expensive by just having subpoena power and one person at the State Board of Elections who will handle enforcement. The bill passed unanimously. I move adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 458 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 540, Senator Guile, Education School Mapping Data Program established, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the vice chair as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Too often, we've had stories of 911 being called because of emergencies in our schools. Whether it's been active shooters or threats, we need to make sure that we've got every possible tool in the toolbox to protect our kids. And this bill will allow state school mapping data to be used so that our 911 centers, our law enforcement, our first responders will have more data when they're going into our school. There are two amendments. The first is technical, and the second requires that the Maryland Center for School Safety will administer the program, and the Interagency Commission on School Construction will help develop the standards. There are two amendments, and excuse me, move adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on, oh, I'm sorry. If we could pull that back on the amendments, Chair recognizes the senator from the 44th District.
Thank you very much. Just had a question for the floor leader.
The floor leader yields.
Yes,
Senator
sir.
may proceed.
When you're talking about school mapping, what exactly are we talking about?
Thank you for the question, and I can also refer to the sponsor of the bill, but bottom line is we need to be able to identify where the problem is within the school so that they're not coming in blind and figuring out where the hallways are, where the classroom is that has the problem. And so it just gives them more information so they can respond quickly, effectively, and help our kids, help protect our kids.
So is it essentially taking blueprints and digitizing blueprints that already exist?
There's a, Senator, I'll yield to the sponsor of the bill.
Let's yield to the sponsor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So what the program would effectively do is take, let's say you've got a blueprint, a construction blueprint of a school, and it would put it on a grid system. This is a procedure, a technique that's used by military to be able to easily and quickly find a person. So for example, right now we have these very large schools. If you've got an active shooter in a library, for that report to be made ultimately to law enforcement and say, where is the shooter? Where's the library located in this very large school? It takes it almost like if you consider the game of like Battleship, where you have like this grid system, so that way they can easily and quickly find it. It's been implemented in other states. It just is an aid for law enforcement to immediately find an active shooter.
And one other question, would these documents be able to be obtained through PIA for the general public?
It's a very good question. I'm not certain. I think we would have to defer to council perhaps on that, be subject to a Public Information Act request.
Checking with council on that, but if you want to, why don't we, let's see if we can get a quick answer, or if we want to.
We can lay it over.
Why don't we, okay, we're going to check on that. It's an excellent question.
Thank you very much.
Should we?
If we lay the bill over under the rule, we
That's
have
fine.
time.
Thank you.
All right. With that, or excuse me, the motion will be in order to lay the bill over under the rule, and we'll get back to it tomorrow. All right. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 883, Senator King, Education Virtual Tutoring Services Applicant Review, favorable with two amendments.
All right. Oh, yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill requires that virtual tutoring services adhere to the same procedures as local boards of education, non-public schools, or contracting agencies when it comes to hiring an employee who will have direct contact with minors. This includes following specific documentation requirements to determine whether an individual has been disciplined for allegations of child sexual abuse or sexual misconduct in the past. There are two committee amendments. The first is technical. The second requires a virtual tutoring service to require contractors who provide tutoring services for students remotely to undergo a criminal history records check under a provision of the law not specifically applicable to individual local school systems, but with similar standards to allow virtual tutoring services to qualify under a uniform set of requirements. I move adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 883 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 967, Senator Zucker, Higher Education Part-Time Senatorial and Delegate Scholarships Alterations, favorable.
Recognizing Senator from District 3 is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we all take great pride in our ability to award student scholarships in our respective districts. This bill allows for some more flexibility in that process, particularly to students with a documented disability. The bill authorizes the Maryland Higher Education Commission to waive the minimum semester hour requirements of 6 hours for part-time senatorial or delegate scholarships that are requested of an applicant with a documented disability. This bill has no amendments. It passed unanimously in committee. Therefore, I move for adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 967 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1026, Senator Brooks, County Board of Education Budgets, Notice of Transparency in Education Spending Act, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill requires the State Board of Education to adopt a process for uniform reporting of information in a County Board of Education budget to timely share the information provided by a County Board of Education in the budget to a county governing body. County boards must prepare an annual budget to include major categories. 1, specified current funds held in reserve. 2, the amount of any federal funds received in the last fiscal year. And 3, the amount of funds held in trust or otherwise dedicated toward long-term obligations for retiree health care costs and other post-employment benefits, and information used to calculate the county board's obligation of those costs. The bill also alters certain notification requirements regarding the transfer of funds within and between major county board budget categories. There are two amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 alters the threshold for notification and approval of transfer within and between the county board budget categories to 10% from 1%, and provides the county board can make transfers that meets a certain threshold with, instead of following, approval of county governing body. The fiscal impact is none. I move the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, chair recognizes the senator from Prince George's.
Yes.
Will the floor leader yield?
Floor leader.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator may proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning. Afternoon.
Good afternoon, I mean. I thought this was already in place.
Well, what was in place before, the only amount that could be transferred if it was 1% or less, this moves that percentage of transfer without getting approval of the commission of the council up to 10%.
Okay.
Yes.
How does this tie into the auditing process? Do you know? I know that the school boards need to be audited. Does this tie in with?
All of that still will be in place. All this does is gives the board now the ability to make a transfer of up to 10%, but all of the other requirements are still in place.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
All right, on the amendments, any further discussion? Any objection to the committee amendments? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1026 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1091, Senator Watson, Education, Blind and Visually Impaired Students Textbook Equity, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this important bill seeks to resolve an issue faced by our blind and visually impaired students. We call it textbook equity, but the issue is when one of these students enters our school systems, it takes time for their textbooks to be transcribed into a format where they can use, typically putting them a month behind their other peers. This bill seeks to resolve that. The bill requires by January 1st, 2025, publishers that sell pupil edition textbooks in the state to provide an electronic file of the textbook in a specified standard to the National Instructional Materials Access Center. It further requires local boards of education by January 15th of each year to determine the instructional materials that will be used in the upcoming year. A local board must coordinate with the Instructional Resource Center to provide the instructional material in a specialized format to students who are blind or visually impaired no later than the first day of classes of the upcoming school year. The Maryland State Department of Education must provide support to the IRC to ensure that textbooks and supplemental materials in a specialized format are available to blind and visually impaired students statewide. If the instructional materials are not available in a specialized format at the IRC and cannot otherwise be obtained, MSDE must cover the cost to produce the instructional material in Braille or large print. There are two committee amendments. The first is technical. The second amendment alters the date by which a county board must determine the instructional materials that will be used by students with an individual education program or a Section 504 plan for the upcoming school year to March 15th from January 15th, and requires a county board and parent of the student, if the county board can't fulfill specified requirements, to develop and agree on a plan to remedy the delivery of the instructional material not later than 45 days before the first day of classes of the upcoming school year. I move favorable to committee amendments and a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1091 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1178, Senator Bailey, Higher Education, Douglas J.J. Peters Veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq Conflict Scholarship, repeal of service terminal date, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from the 23rd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this emergency bill expands eligibility for the Douglas J.J. Peters Veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq Conflict Scholarship by repealing the terminal dates of eligibility, which are prescribed by the U.S. Secretary of Defense for service in Iraq or Afghanistan. Under the bill, individuals who are eligible for Douglas J.J. Peters Veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq Conflict Scholarship, provided such an individual, in addition to other eligibility requirements, served in Afghanistan or contiguous airspace as defined in federal regulations on or after October 24, 2001, or Iraq or contiguous water or airspace as defined by federal regs on or after March 19, 2003. There are no committee amendments. I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1178 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Yes, Chair recognizes the
Can I
Majority
make a
Leader.
quick introduction? Just
Yeah,
take me
please,
a second.
please.
I have a very dear friend up in the gallery today, Mr. Clint Sabrati. He has gotten very involved in the political process in my district and has been a great help to me and a very dear friend. So I welcome him today.
Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for being here. Thank you. All right, let's stick with Education, Energy, and the Environment. Report number 27. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 300, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, Natural Resources, Wildland Areas, Beltwoods, Wildland, favorable to amendments.
Recognizing Senator from the 35th is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This departmental bill authorizes Department of Natural Resources to authorize within the Beltwoods Wildland archaeological inventories, studies, and research that involve surface examination or limited subsurface sampling, salvage and excavation of archaeological sites, and stabilization and restoration of historic structures existing as of December 1st, 1985. Any such authorization may only take place with prior approval of the Maryland Historical Trust and after an internal departmental review. There are two committee amendments. The first one is technical. The Second Amendment requires DNR to consult with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission prior to undertaking any activities on the Seton Belt Barn in Wildland. I'd like to move the two committee amendments and ask for adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 300 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 674, Senator Elfreth, Abandoned or Sunken Vessels and Waterway Improvement Fund Grants, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing Chair of the Committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 674 requires, beginning in fiscal year 2026, the Department of Natural Resources is required to distribute at least $250,000 annually from the Waterway Improvement Fund to a statewide-based, Maryland-based historic preservation nonprofit organization with a demonstrated experience in grant making. The bill also modifies requirements and processes for the department to contact vessel owners during emergencies and when seizing, removing, or taking into custody abandoned or sunken vessels. Finally, Mr. President, the bill authorizes the department to establish and administer a voluntary vessel turn-in program that allows the owners of certain vessels turn in the vessel to the department to be destroyed subject to specified requirements. There are two amendments. Amendment number 1 specifies required uses for funding received by a nonprofit organization from the Waterway Improvement Fund. And amendment number 2 alters notice requirements and processes and requirements for the voluntary vessel turn-in program. The amendment also establishes priorities for the department in determining whether a vessel is eligible for the program. There's also a sponsor amendment. Mr. President, the bill passed unanimously out of the committee, and with that, I would move the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, Chair recognizes the minority leader.
Yeah, just very quickly, if I could take a look at that. Can we lay over under the rule, please?
Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendments will lay over under the rule. Let's go to the Finance Committee. Oh, I'm sorry. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 915, Senator Brooks, Agriculture, Invasive Plant Species Regulation, Biodiversity, and Agriculture Protection Act, favorable with two amendments.
Apologies for that, Senators. Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 915 alters the regulatory approach for controlling invasive plant species in the state. The bill repeals the existing two-tiered regulatory approach and instead establishes a regulatory approach that generally involves assessment of non-native plant species by expert assessors to determine the invasiveness rank of each species, the review of such assessment, and 3, the determination by the Secretary of Agriculture whether such species should be classified as prohibited invasive plants and includes on a consolidated list of Maryland invasive plant species, or which list. Specified regulations must be adopted, among other things. The regulations must classify as prohibited invasive plants all terrestrial plants classified by regulations before January 1, 2024 as Tier 1 or Tier 2 invasive plants. The bill makes other related and conforming changes. The bill takes effect June 1, 2024. There are two committee amendments. The amendment add requirements for invasive plant advisory committee relating to the qualifications of the independent assessor, as well as requiring the committee to review data submitted to the committee and advise the Secretary of Agriculture regarding whether a cultivar selection or a specific hybrid of prohibited invasive plants is not invasive, and whether it should be classified as such. Also, whether all Tier 1 and Tier 2 invasive plants under the bill are drafted or to be classified as prohibited invasive plant. The amendment changes this to only Tier 1, with the Tier 2 invasive plants to be assessed by a certain date in accordance with the bill. Lastly, the amendment adds an exception to address concerns of State Highway Administration, allowing SHA to conduct certain prohibited activities for the purpose of controlling or disposing of prohibited invasive plants along state highways without prior approval of the Secretary. Okay, I move the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 915 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right. Let's go to Finance Committee. Report number 25. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 22, Senator Hayes, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages Board of License Commissioners, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing Senator from Baltimore City is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 22 requires that the governor, instead of the mayor of Baltimore City or the president of Baltimore City Council, to appoint 3 regular members and 1 substitute member to the Baltimore City Board of License Commissioners. The bill specifies that a member of the board is subject to the conflict of interest rules of the State Ethics Commission, and that a member of the employee of the board must comply with public ethics laws of the state and financial disclosure requirements set by the State Ethics Commission. Amendment number 1 changes the title of the bill. Amendment number 2 requires the executive secretary and deputy secretary of the board license commissioners for Baltimore City to be residents of Baltimore City or to have served in the city government for a minimum of 5 years immediately preceding their appointment. I move the amendments and adoption of favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, chair recognizes the senator from the 45th district.
Questions on the amendments, Mr. President.
On the amendments, will the floor leader yield for question?
I guess, could you elaborate on the reason for number 2, amendment number 2?
Let's see what that number 2 does. Oh, so amendment number 2. So currently, the law says that an individual has to be a city resident. This provides an opportunity of an individual, whether they're a city resident or they have worked for Baltimore City government 5 consecutive years leading up into their appointment.
So would it be correct to characterize that currently as statute is current that Baltimore City residents are prioritized and that this amendment will open it up to others?
Yes.
So can you elaborate, like, what would that be necessary for?
So, oftentimes Baltimore is surrounded by several counties. On one end is surrounded by Anne Arundel County and other places, and so it's easy to get to. But individuals, it would allow for individuals that have dedicated their service to the city of Baltimore and its residents an opportunity to be appointed to the role as Deputy Commissioner of Baltimore Liquor Board.
So I'm under the presumption that the director of the respective commission is still holding that position, correct?
Correct.
And it's the deputy director that just recently changed in that position, correct?
Correct.
Do the current deputy director live in the city of Baltimore?
No.
Do she live in the state of Maryland?
No.
So would you
Neither
say,
does like 30% of the Baltimore City Police Department.
okay, so would you say, how long was the position put forward, open up for Baltimore City residents before we decided to hire someone that didn't live in the state?
No idea.
Can you speak to what platform was this on before we decided to hire someone else out of state?
I could not.
Could you see if any senator or anyone was consulted to see if there are other Baltimoreans, 600,000 plus, a little shy of 600,000, that could have filled that position that is held by a person that's currently out of the state?
Nope, not relevant to the bill.
So you're saying that the Monumental City Bar Association wasn't associated. You're saying that the University of Baltimore, their BALSA student law, Black Student Law Association wasn't consulted when we decided to hire someone out of state.
Neither, they may or may not have, I can't speak to it, but that's not a requirement for them to hold this position, no.
So, Mr. President, the next question that I would ask is, what's the median income for the city of Baltimore, a resident in the city of Baltimore?
I have no idea.
Well, I do have an idea. It's $31,000 for a person. Would you be able to speak to what the median income is for a family in the city of Baltimore?
No, but I'm sure you can.
$58,000, Mr. President. Can I ask the question, how much is the salary of this respective position for the deputy director that we decided to hire someone that doesn't live in the state make?
Don't know.
Well, I do know, Mr. President. It's $125,000, twice, I repeat, twice the median income of a family in the city of Baltimore. The next question that I would ask is, while it is $125,000, in that short period of time that the deputy director sits in that position, was a raise given for that position for a person that does not live in the state?
Is that a rhetorical question? Do you want me to answer?
I'm asking.
I think you got the answer to it.
These are the things that we should know prior to voting on a piece of legislation that impacts Baltimoreans.
Right, so I would inform the body that most of this and this line of question was argued in delegation. This is a local bill. The delegation voted 3-1 on the bill, and it passed the committee unanimously. So essentially what we're participating in now is a re-exercise of a city delegation on an issue that's already been determined.
I would say that when you have 500,000 plus people, I would say, Mr. President, and when you have 300,000 plus adults, when we know that the median income in the city of Baltimore is $58,000, and that this position holds 125,000 plus benefits, plus the raise that was recently given within the last couple months for a person that lives out of the state, that this definitely warrants the conversation that needs to be had. So, colleagues, I won't ask any more questions, but let me speak to the amendment. Let me speak to the amendment. So I take it, as a person that's born and raised in the city of Baltimore, not one day do myself have the privilege to apply for a position that I do not meet the entire criteria for, and then come ask a body of 188 legislators to come and vote to change the state law for me. Mr. President, I say every day that I sit in this seat, I know that it's a privilege. I know that it's a privilege because I grew up in a certain zip code. And let me be clear that the people that grew up in the same similar zip code do not always get the opportunity to sit in a seat like this. I don't know who has that type of privilege that can come and ask 188 legislators to come and change a specific law for them. I don't know who can come, and we cannot do our due diligence to make sure that every Baltimorean that wanted the opportunity to apply for this position get the opportunity to apply for that position. I do not know anyone that cannot come to the respective body and then apply for that respective position. I would say that in good conscience, Mr. President, that a lot of doors have been open for me to be able to sit in this seat. And there's no way that I will be able to close the doors on Baltimoreans that a number of them are going to failing schools that would never get that 125,000 opportunity. But let's say that they graduate from that failing school. A lot of times they don't have the network. They don't have the network to be able to apply for that $125,000 position or even know that it's open. I can't close the door on them folks. So let's say that you're trying your best. And a lot of times in our city, these are first-time college applying graduates that's going to school. So their mom or their dad didn't graduate from one of our distinguished universities, but somehow they graduated from it by themselves a lot of time. They don't have that helping hand. They don't have that network. They do not have the same educational opportunities that's given to the adjacent jurisdictions. But let's say that they figure it out. I can't close the door now. I got to make sure that they get every opportunity to get to that 125,000, Mr. President. And then let's talk about the apathy. People are apathetic in the city of Baltimore. They're apathetic in the city of Baltimore because when they look at issues that impact them, directly impact them, such as the HBCUs that took a decade for the state to address. And when the state addressed it, we look at similar situations for people that do not live in the state of Maryland, that is not a resident for the city of Baltimore, and they can fast track it for 188 people, Mr. President. Then I think about the transportation issues that we deal with in the city of Baltimore. I think about how a number of our young people cannot even get to school on time, let alone get to school at all, because of the failing system of transportation in the city of Baltimore. But we can stand here and fast track a bill for someone that do not even live in the city of Baltimore, let alone the state of Maryland, and make 125,000, Mr. President. I think about that apathy. Then I think about the history. See, I stand rooted in my history. I stand rooted in Baltimore City's history. And I knew that there was a moment in time where the first black elected mayor had this same conversation. And he stood by himself, Mr. President. He had the conversation about residency requirements. And residency requirements applied to everybody in the state of Maryland until the first black mayor of the city of Baltimore, representing a major urban jurisdiction filled with black people, came. And you know what the state of Maryland did? They got rid of residency requirements for the whole state, every county in 1995. Then 1997 come, and they get rid of all of the residency requirements for every municipality right here in the state of Maryland, because this body did not look like this at that time. This body was not as diverse as this at that time, Mr. President. So I stand here knowing what apathy looks like, knowing that I can't close the door on other Baltimoreans that grew up just like me and do not have the privilege to be able to sit in a seat like this. Mr. President, I stand here rooted in my history, so I would ask for a roll call on the amendment so I can make sure that I push my red button so the folks back home knew that I was standing with them, not against them. Thank you.
All right. On the amendments, we remain on the committee amendments. The floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I appreciate the passion in which my colleague has delivered his arguments here today. I would just remind our colleagues that the amendments here does not restrict anyone from the city of Baltimore from holding these positions. I often meet with a lot of young people from Baltimore City, and there's not many of them that aspire to be the deputy director of the liquor board. I get the case. This bill and this amendment provides an opportunity for city residents or individuals who have served the city of Baltimore honorably and given back to the city of Baltimore in employment directly before being appointed, have an opportunity to serve as the deputy director of the liquor board. I ask that this body hold true to what the delegation has already deliberated on and made a decision, as well as the committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the committee amendments, if there's no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 29 votes in the affirmative, the committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 22 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Look forward to a lot of these votes in the future on delegation bills, too. All right, clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 485, Senator Hayes, Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program Modifications, favorable with 2 amendments.
All right. Chair recognizes Senator from District 40 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nope, wrong bill. All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 485 makes additional changes to the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program for the purpose of effectuating the Maryland Department of Labor's implementation of the program. The bill extends key deadlines, alters definitions and components of the program's administration. The bill also authorizes the establishment of fees of private employer plans to pay for the regulation of the plans. The start date of the required contributions to the fund is moved 9 months later to July 1st, 2025, and benefit payments will begin and months later on June 1st, 2026. The definition of wages is also altered to match the definition for unemployment insurance. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 is technical and clarifying, specifies the purpose and use of the contributions for grants and facilitate community partnerships, specify that the program fund includes specified revenues from fees and penalties, and provide that the fees are only for administrative purposes. I move the amendments and the adoption of a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 485 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 539, Senator Guile, Commercial Law, Consumer Protection, Sale and Resale of Tickets, favorable with 4 amendments.
Chair, the sponsor of the bill is floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senate Bill 539 establishes protections and disclosure requirements relating to the sale and resale of tickets for entertainment events. The bill prohibits a ticket reseller from selling or offering to sell speculative tickets, which are tickets that are not in the possession of the reseller at the time of sale. The bill also requires the listing for a ticket to disclose the total price of the ticket, including all fees and taxes, provide an itemized listing of all charges that comprise the total price of the ticket, including all fees and taxes, and identify the seat number and zone or section of the ticket to the extent applicable to the seat and venue. Amendment 1 makes changes to the purpose paragraph. Amendment 2 strikes from the bill other requirements and restrictions relating to the resale of tickets, such as provisions that would have capped the price at which a reseller may sell a ticket and the fee that a secondary ticket exchange could charge for providing its services, and prohibited restrictions on the transferability or resale of tickets under certain circumstances. Amendment 3 alters definitions, modifies price disclosure requirements to provide for cost increases due to shipping costs, and requires a ticket issuer, secondary ticket exchange, or reseller to provide a refund to a ticket purchaser under certain circumstances. Amendment 4 requires the Consumer Protection Division and the Office of the Attorney General to conduct a review of the event ticket market in the state and submit a report to specified legislative committees. We also have here, Mr. President, there's 2 floor technical amendments. The bill passed the committee unanimously. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 4 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from District 7 on the
Thank you, Mr. President.
amendments.
Floor leader yield for a quick question.
Yes, of course.
So I know when a bill originally came in, I think it was an issue about not being able to resell tickets at a higher price.
Correct.
And now you're dealing with speculative stuff. What about myself owning a ticket? Am I allowed to sell it for higher than face value?
Yes, you may. What this bill does, Mr. President, is basically 3 things. It requires greater transparency in ticket prices, bans the sale of speculative tickets. These are tickets that a person doesn't even own. And then third, requires the Office of Attorney General Consumer Protection Division to do a study on the ticketing market. So in short, there is no cap in this bill.
Okay, so speaking of caps, let's say just making sure, I buy tickets for next year for the caps. Alex Ovechkin goes on an incredible streak of goals and winds up the ticket I have is the night that he could break the record, and the tickets go through the roof, $1,000 a piece. I'm like, well, I don't want to go. I'll sell the tickets. So I'm okay to sell it $1,000 now, if that's the market.
That's correct. You could indeed do
Okay.
that. I would just add, though, by the way, that if capitals are in DC, this wouldn't even be applicable there, even if it were the case. But notwithstanding that, there is no cap in this bill.
So, okay, so it's only for Maryland-based locations.
Yes, exactly.
Copy. All right, thanks.
Unless, of course, after Virginia does not have them, they end up here in Maryland. You just never know. You
That could
never
always
know.
happen.
Never know. All right, recognize the minority leader on the bill? On the amendment, excuse me.
On the amendment. Thank you very much. Just a quick question for the floor leader, please.
Yes, of course.
I just want to make sure I understood again, with respect to season tickets, it's not included anymore. With respect to all-in pricing, that was one of the things that was mentioned. You wanted the apps to bring that up. Many of the apps already have that you can choose between seeing all-in pricing or just the cost of the ticket. And I think the reason being, if you're a purchaser, you might want to see what's the all-in price as long as you're going through it. If you were selling your ticket, you might want to say, what are the ticket prices that are around my tickets being sold for? So does this allow, does it give the consumer the option that they can toggle between all-in pricing or ticket pricing, or does it say it must be all-in pricing all the time? I think if we got to that.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. I know this was discussed during the bill hearing. This would require at each phase and the listing of that ticket that all-in pricing at each phase.
So as long as an app provided that option, is that okay? I mean, if I chose that I don't want to see that part of it, I want to just see what the cost of the ticket is without all the fees. And I think that's the way most apps are. Is that okay as long as it does it? As long as it has the ability to do that?
You know, I think if the option is given for the all-in pricing on that page, I would assume that would fulfill the requirements of it.
Okay. I would think so too. I just wanted to check, but I appreciate that. Okay,
Yep.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, on the amendments, any further discussion? If not, any objections to the committee amendments? Without objection, the 4 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title?
Yep. I have 2 floor amendments, Mr. President.
All
They're
right, Senator
technical.
has amendments. If the pages could collect and distribute the senator's amendment. And we. Pages are doing a great job distributing these amendments quickly. We're loading them up. Well-oiled machine here. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. So in our voting session, we took one amendment that was presented by a committee member that just wanted to guarantee some refund guarantees. So if your event is canceled or for some other reason beyond your control that you need to get a refund, that we wanted to make sure that that consumer would be able to get that refund. The thing is how the way it was written, there was some concern that if the event was canceled, that you could, let's say you bought your ticket from the secondary ticket market, that you could go to anybody along that chain and get your refund. So we just wanted to make clear by this amendment, it was discussed in committee that we would try to clear this up later on the floor, that you could only get that refund directly from whomever you had that transaction with. So that's what, and I would move the amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the senator from District 7.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just, kind of a big bill, gotten a couple questions. I want to ask to lay it over, but you said you have another amendment too?
Correct.
If it's okay, let's just lay this one over. Is it possible, I guess, never mind. I was going to see if we get the other amendment too to make sure it's correct, but we'll just lay it over and deal with it tomorrow.
All right, the senator's motion is in order.
Okay.
The bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. I think we're going to pause it there. It's been a long morning. I know we'll get there. We have time. We have a calendar. I'm sorry. I keep ending one early. Clerk, read the next bill. Checking it off too quickly.
Senate Bill 950, Senator Hedelman, sexual assault forensic examinations conducted through telehealth, reimbursement, and study, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 950 alters provisions of law relating to the provision of sexual assault forensic exam to allow exams to be conducted through telehealth. We found that there were women that were victims of sexual assault that had to go to multiple hospitals to have their forensic exam done. So this bill allows it to be done with another professional by telehealth, helping the nurse or whoever's at the hospital where the victim is located. The bill requires the Maryland Sexual Assault Evidence Kit Policy and Funding Committee to study and make recommendations on the feasibility of a telehealth program that includes the use of TeleSafe pilot program framework, a program currently in use in Pennsylvania. Amendment 1 makes a change to the purpose paragraph, and Amendment 2 clarifies that the bill authorizes peer-to-peer telehealth exams as defined in the bill. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are we there? There it goes. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 950 is hereby ordered, printed for 3rd reading. All right, we will call it there.
Mr. President?
Yes, recognized senator from 23rd District.
Thank you. I'd like to change my vote to yay on Senate Bill 22.
To yay on the committee.
The amendment.
On the committee amendments. All right, if we could grab the vote change. Are there any objections to the senator's motion? Without objection. Oh, if we could get the vote change slip. We need the slip, Senator, sorry. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. All right, anything else there? All right, tomorrow is going to be a long floor day. So for our wonderful committee chairs. Oh yeah, we'll get there, just if there's stuff at committee business that can be taken care of today, today's the day to do it. And we'll just, tomorrow and Friday are going to be heavy. All right, let's check with the Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we'll go in at 2:30. And we have 9 bills, 62 witnesses, followed by voting.
All right. Busy in finance. Education, energy, and the environment.
Okay, we have no bill hearings today, but we will be doing a voting. We have a voting session. Because we don't have the bill hearings, we're going to go 2:45 for voting.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Budget and tax?
Thank you, Mr. President. 2:30 voting.
2:30, all right. Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will reconvene at 3 o'clock for voting.
Excellent. All right, 3 o'clock for Judicial Proceedings. Any other standing committees, select committees, caucuses, delegations, announcements? If not? Sure. Okay. Sure. All right. All right, if there's not anything further, let's do a quorum call.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Thursday, March 14th at 10 a.m.
10 a.m. Without objection, so ordered. Have a safe and wonderful day.